Good evening, everyone. This is the Planning Commission of the Town of Los Gatos meeting of Wednesday, March 8, 2023. The meeting is now called to order. Please take a moment to silence your devices if you haven't done that already. And I'll begin with the roll call. Unfortunately, Commissioner Hanson is sick tonight, so we'll start with Commissioner Thomas.
Present.
Commissioner Raspy.
Present.
Commissioner Burnett.
Present.
Commissioner Clark.
Present.
And Commissioner Janoff.
Here.
And I'm here as well. As we begin every meeting of the Planning Commission, we have a presentation on the town's rules on decorum and civility, and so I'd like to ask that we proceed with that at this time. Thank you.
The public is welcome to participate in the meetings, understanding that the purpose of the meeting is to conduct the important business of the town in an efficient and effective manner. For the benefit of the entire community, the town of Los Gatos asks that all speakers follow the town's meeting guidelines by treating everyone with respect and dignity. This is done by following meeting guidelines set forth in state law, in the town code, and on the cover sheet of the agenda. The town embraces diversity and strongly condemns hate speech and offensive hateful language or racial intolerance of any kind at board, commission, or committee meetings. Town council and staff are well aware of the public's right to disagree with their professional opinion on various town issues. However, antisocial behavior, slander, hatred, and bigotry statements are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form at board, commission, or committee meetings. All public comments at the board, commission, or committee meeting must pertain to items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the town and shall not contain slanderous statements, hatred, and bigotry against non-public officials. The town will go through the following steps if a disturbance results from a member of the public not following these rules. If participating remotely, town staff may mute the individual with an explanation for the record of why muting occurred consistent with this policy. If participating in person, the chair may call a recess for violation of this policy, resulting in the immediate cessation of the audio and video recording and the commissioners exiting the chamber or meeting room. Staff will determine if the individual should be removed or if all members of the public should leave, depending on the extent of the disturbance. In the event that all public members exit, only the press would be allowed back in the meeting. Once the individual or individuals leave, the commissioners would return to the chamber or meeting room and the chair would resume the meeting. Persons disrupting a board, commission, or committee meeting may be cited for violation of the California Penal Code, Section 403.
Thank you for that presentation, and I'll now ask that we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and that will be led by Commissioner Thomas tonight.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So as we begin the meeting tonight, I'd like to make a few preliminary remarks. First, at tonight's meeting, any person desiring to speak must first be recognized by the chair. All participants must speak at the microphone or when they're called upon in Zoom. All public comments shall be directed to the commission as a body and not to any one commissioner, nor to the audience. No person other than commissioners, staff, and the person having the floor shall be permitted to enter into the discussion. All members of the applicant or appellant's team shall be heard as a group within the stated time limit. No member of the public is allowed to speak a second time. To ensure the opportunity for all of those desiring to speak before the commission, there's no yielding of time to another speaker. And furthermore, as the Planning Commission conducts the meeting this evening, we encourage active participation by the public, which is essential to our democracy and critical to the work of our Planning Commission. Public input is very much welcomed, and comments on the matters on the agenda are always considered carefully. Tonight, the public's participation can occur in three ways. First, in advance of our meeting, we welcome comments that are submitted to the staff. And during verbal communications portion of the meeting, an individual may speak on any topic that is not on the agenda and that is within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. During the hearing on a specific agenda item also, members of the public may choose to speak on that item. If you wish to address the commission tonight during either verbal communications or on a specific agenda item, please raise your hand in the Zoom app if you're appearing by Zoom. Or for those here in person, complete a speaker card, which are located on the holders in back of the bench, and turn those over to a member of staff who will bring it forward to me. When you speak, I ask that you come up to the microphone and speak clearly and directly into it, as the meeting is being televised and recorded. In fairness to all who wish to speak at this meeting, it's necessary that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, okay? So we'll begin with the verbal communications portion of our meeting, during which members of the public are invited.
Just adjusting the microphone.
Okay, it was echoing before.
They were turning it up.
Okay, so we'll begin with the verbal communications portion of our meeting, which again invites members of the public to speak on any item that is not within the, not on the agenda and is within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Staff will announce when your 3-minute time limit is up. For those on Zoom and for those present, do we still have the yellow light and the red light available? Okay, so you'll get the yellow light at 30 minutes of time left and red light when your time is up. So, Ms. Armour, I'd like to start with those who are online, if we have any Zoom members of the community.
Thank you. I'll check in with Director Paulson, who has the Zoom screen in front of him, to see if there are any hands raised.
Thank you, Chair. So anyone who is participating via Zoom, please raise your hand if you'd like to speak on an item that is not on the agenda. Chair, I don't see any hands raised.
Thank you. And do we have any members of the public who wish to speak through the microphone tonight at the presence of the commission? I don't have any cards for that. Okay, then we'll move on to the consent calendar. Tonight we have 3 items on our consent calendar, the first of 2 being the approval of the minutes of our meetings of January 11th and January 25th. The third item is the request for approval of an accessory structure requiring variances to the accessory structure lot coverage standards and the side and rear setbacks. The property is commonly known as 202 University Avenue. The APN is 529-04001, and it's located in the University Edelin Historic District. Before the Planning Commission acts on the consent calendar, any member of the commission or a member of the public may ask that that matter be removed from the consent calendar. So I'll ask at this time if there are any such requests. I don't see any. Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar? Commissioner Raspy, Vice Chair Raspy?
Chair, I'll move to approve the consent calendar as presented, please.
And do we have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Burnett. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Raspy?
Yes.
Commissioner Burnett?
Yes.
Commissioner Clark?
Yes.
Commissioner Janoff?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so the matter passes unanimously. And now we move forward to public hearings, and the first item, number 4, is on our agenda, which concerns an appeal of the Santa Clara County Fire Department decision denying a request for an exception to the state minimum fire regulations on property zoned HR-5, located at 114 Wood Road, APN 510-47045, building permit application B22-0025. And the property owners and appellants are Omari and Kavita Bouknight. And I believe we have a report from Mr. Sean Mullen tonight, right?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. Before you this evening is an appeal of a Santa Clara County Fire Department decision denying a request for an exception to the state minimum fire safe regulations on property located at 144 Wood Road. The subject property is located on the north side of Wood Road, approximately 1,663 feet from the intersection of Wood Road and South Santa Cruz Avenue. The subject property is undeveloped and approximately 29,632 square feet. An architecture insight application was submitted to the town on January 27th, 2021, proposing construction of a new residence and site improvements on the subject property. Through the town's development review process, the application was evaluated by staff several times through June of 2021. After evaluating each iteration of the project, staff from planning, building, engineering, and fire provided comments on the application or deemed the application complete for processing. By June 22nd, 2021, all departments had deemed the application complete and it was forwarded to the Planning Commission for consideration. The application was approved with conditions on August 25th, 2021. A building permit application for construction of the residence was submitted to the town on January 10th of this year. To date, town staff has reviewed 3 iterations of the project. Materials and comments were provided to the property owners in March, July, and December of 2022, As of December 2022, planning, building, and engineering have approved the building permit application, and comments from the fire department related to the Public Resources Code 4290 and the fire safe regulations remain outstanding. As detailed in your staff report, the fire safe regulations are a product of Public Resources Code 4290, which was adopted by the Board of Forestry in 1991. PRC 4290 requires the development of the fire safe regulations, which were not applicable to the lands outside of the state responsibility area until July 1st of 2021. Since July 21, the regulations have been applicable to the very high fire severity zones within the local responsibility area. This covers much of the town's hillside area. During review of the building permits, the fire department issued comments related to PRC 4290, the fire safe regulations, and other fire department standards. A number of the initial comments were resolved through project revisions and added details. However, as of November 2022, 3 deficiencies related to the provisions of the fire safe regulations remained outstanding. These were road grades, corner radii, and turnarounds. The property owners and the fire department coordinated to find remedies to the outstanding items, including multiple meetings, production of additional materials, plan revisions, and an operational assessment of the existing roadway. The property owners filed an exception request with the fire department on December 13th, 2022, and this request was denied by their fire department on January 18th of this year, based on 2 outstanding deficiencies, road grades, and turnarounds. On February 1st of this year, the property owners appealed the decision to the fire department to the Planning Commission. The staff report provides a detailed discussion and analysis of the outstanding issues related to the fire safe regulations, the exception request, and the appeal. Based on the analysis included in your staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission grant the appeal based on the following. The costs associated with any required road improvements needed to re-engineer Wood Road to comply with the fire safe regulations would not be roughly proportional to the impacts of the new single-family residence and would result in a taking. The existing topography, private property ownership, and construction costs associated with any required road improvements represent insurmountable practical barriers to re-engineering the roadway, and the demonstrated serviceability of Wood Road, along with the incremental emergency access and egress improvements of a new turnout offered by the appellants, meet the intent of providing defensible space consistent with the fire safe regulations. An addendum to your staff report was distributed yesterday that included additional public comment received after the publishing of the staff report. And this concludes my presentation, and staff, including representatives from the Santa Clara County Fire Department, are available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. And before we go on to the presentation by the applicant, I would like to ask the commissioners to show by a raise of hand whether they visited the property. And are there any disclosures pertaining to this matter? I see none. Okay, are there any questions of staff at this time? No? You'll have another opportunity later. And so we'll now open the public portion of the public hearing and give the applicant an opportunity to address the commission for up to 5 minutes. And I understand Mr. Buchnight will be making that presentation.
You can move to the next slide. Good evening, and thank you for hearing my appeal request. My name is Omari Bachnight, and I'm a local resident and property owner here in Los Gatos, and I'm pleased to speak on behalf of my family with respect to our approved application to build a single-family residence. We submitted our application back in January of 2021, and after receiving Planning Commission approval, submitted a request to receive our grading permits in accordance with our final conditions of approval in October 2021. It's now been more than 2 years from initial submission, and it's been 18 months since grading permit request, and we've not been able to start our approved project. Please, let's resolve this tonight. Next slide, please. First, I would like to thank Mr. Mullen and the members of the Santa Clara Fire Department for their dedication to service and engagement. My family's history in the U.S. can be traced back more than 200 years, and its dedication to service is distinctive. So I have particular appreciation for those who act in service of others. As a result, public fire safety is incredibly important to us. Next slide, please. Tonight, however, is not about individuals. It is about an obscure and broken process that has resulted in unreasonably long timelines and simultaneously cost us thousands of dollars in direct costs and tens of thousands of dollars in indirect costs. It has been a process that would make both Sisyphus and Rube Goldberg blush. Next slide, please. So what are the specific conditions or considerations of which you should be aware regarding the process in our specific case? First, actions were not in accordance with the timeline of PRC 4290. PRC 4290 is an old guideline. It was enacted in 1987 and first adopted in 1991. It has long not been enforced in the application to existing roads in relation to current legal lots for single-family housing, in part because implementation based on a point-by-point assessment of a road after it has been built will nearly always result in the failure to comply. Saratoga recently completed a review of implementation of 4290, and I'm quoting from their staff report. Most, if not all, of the roads subject to fire safe regulations in Saratoga do not meet this standard. Implementation of 4290 was supposedly expanded on July 1st, 2021, in a way that would apply to the majority of Los Gatos. Nearly 70% of this town is in a very high fire hazard severity zone. Nonetheless, there has never been public mention of how this regulation would be introduced to our town. There's never been a forum for discussion. Even our planning department was unaware of its application nearly a year after its supposed introduction. Nonetheless, we received a letter of approval of our application based on a detailed review by fire, including site access on June 23rd, 2021, before supposed implementation. Number two, the actions were not in accordance with town process. As part of an architectural site and development application, the town requires a rigorous technical review. That technical review is in place to ensure that the proposed project, quote, meets all code and policy requirements. This includes review of site access. Approvals through the technical review process and eventually through Planning Commission is what renders final conditions of approval. We are now facing an alteration of those conditions. We didn't even have a hint that 4290 was coming into play until more than 7 months after July 1st, 2021. We have been asked to go through a supplemental review procedure, which is not codified in the development guidelines, after approval at significant cost to ourselves. We're the only applicants who received Planning Commission approval who have been asked to alter final conditions. This conflicts with the town's development procedure. Number three, process of implementing 4290 in Los Gatos appears to be an outlier. Most, if not all, counties have either waited for clarity around regulation amendments or have coordinated through their planning organizations to introduce common sense interpretations. Even broader Santa Clara County, which was the first to adopt these regulations, has changed them. Saratoga followed suit last week. Number four, significant reengineering of Wood Road would constitute a taking. Under 3 different legal doctrines, the requirement to reengineer Wood Road would constitute a taking without just compensation in violation of the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution. From a practical point of view, making a single resident re-engineer a well-functioning public roadway that aligns with the spirit of the regulation makes no common sense. Lastly, as noted by staff, the project meets the intent of providing defensible space consistent with the 4290 regulations. Over the past 10 months, we have undertaken a rigorous process to further understand our project's relation to fire safety. As part of that process, we brought in a consultant who has served as fire chief at a large agency for more than 30 years. His conclusion was as follows. After reviewing the project, supporting documents, it is my opinion that the justifications not only meet the intent of these regulations, they exceed them. In conclusion, I would ask for your support this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booknight. And before you sit down, I'll ask if there's any commissioners who have questions of you concerning the application and the appeal. Not seeing any. Okay. I have one question for you. On page 221 of the staff report, it states that, or you state that the Santa Clara County Fire Department has, quote, informally expressed support for our appeal, close quote. Do you have any way to elucidate that?
Yeah, I can only provide my perspective. There are members here who can provide theirs, but our last meeting with them, I believe, was on Friday, January 23rd, and we had a long discussion about the situation, and we've been working collaboratively throughout the process. My understanding of their position is they feel like their hands are tied to a certain extent and have to take a point-by-point assessment. However, their view seemed to be that they felt that the road was navigable. So my assessment of that was that they were informally supporting the appeal.
Okay, thank you for that. And do you have an opinion concerning the cost to you if it were necessary to rebuild Wood Road to meet the fire department's requirements relating to slope and turnaround, engineering, acquisition, and land costs and construction?
Do I have an opinion?
Yes. Have you looked into the
Oh, yes,
that
absolutely.
matter to obtain an estimate?
Yes, extensively.
What's your opinion?
If you wouldn't mind, I'll just grab some quick notes on that.
Certainly.
Okay. So we recently obtained a specific quote to be able to understand the costs associated with developing our driveway, which is a good precedent because the driveway has sloped to it up to 20%. The cost for the driveway of 273 feet of retaining wall, which is an average of 3 feet high, and 262 feet of paved driveway with required grading is estimated at $330,000. Now, our civil engineer took a look at the application of that cost and said, okay, well, let's expound upon it because you'd have to create retaining walls and do the grading for the road itself. So in that case, if we were to change the grade and reduce it to 18.8%, that would require construction of over 300 feet of 8 feet high retaining walls. The cost of that is approximately 5 times the amount of the driveway, so the estimate is $1.5 million. Ironically, the existing configuration actually more closely matches the requirement of limiting the length of slopes above 16%. So we would go from 550 feet of road over 16% to 750 feet of road over 16%, because there's intersections there that you can't extend the road out. So what you would have to do is you'd have to reduce some slope in some places and increase it in others. So ironically, that would actually result in a poorer configuration, if you will. So the road as it stands is actually better aligned than re-engineering the project itself. And my civil engineer is on the line if you'd like to hear directly from her.
I think we're good unless other commissioners would like to proceed with that. No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we now invite comments on this item from members of the public. And again, let's start with anyone who's using the raise hand feature on Zoom.
Thank you, Chair. The first speaker will be Kieran.
Okay,
Hi
Karen?
there. Can you guys all hear me clearly?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Good evening, planning commissioners. My name is Kiran Prasad. I live here in the local area with my family, and I really appreciate the opportunity to voice my support for the Booknight's appeal. I have known Omari and Kavita for over 25 years, and they're incredible, incredible people that are incredibly community-minded, right? They have a great, great family. They have 2 wonderful children, and they have an elder father, Kavita's father, who lives with them and has for many years. And so I just know that part of the intention with their proposed home is to build a place where they can grow the community, they can bring in their grandparents and have a large family that really becomes part of the community here in Los Gatos. So my wife and I are among the first to see Omari and Kavita's property back in June 2020. And we have been very, very close to the build process and have taken particular interest in it as we went through our own home build process a couple of years ago. And while the hurdles that are there in every single approval process, what the Bucknights have been through is completely excessive and unnecessary. I'm not sure what the justification is for altering the final conditions of approval after a planning commission approval, but it feels highly, highly inappropriate. Most importantly, when the Bucknights have proposed significantly improves the fire safety in the area as compared to leaving their lot vacant, right? I think that's like such a huge thing. It's not just about like whether they are able to do this, but the value they're going to provide to the community and to the fire safety of that area, I think will be massively improved. Even the road assessment that is conducted shows solid alignment with the regulation in question this evening. So I would urge the Planning Commission to approve their appeal request this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. And do we have another speaker on Zoom?
We do. The next speaker will be Margaret.
Margaret, please proceed.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, good evening. My name is Margaret Belska, and I'm one of the landowners in unincorporated Santa Clara County who was also impacted by PRC 4290, the state minimum fire safe regulations. As part of my conditions of approval, I was asked to make significant and costly improvements to the existing subdivision road leading to my parcel. These improvements were completely unaffordable to me and basically rendered my parcel unbuildable. After being denied a request for exception by the Santa Clara County Fire Department, I appealed my case to the Santa Clara County Planning Commission. The Planning Commission agreed with my argument that what was being asked of me was a violation of my constitutional rights and could qualify as a taking. My appeal was granted. Subsequently, the Santa Clara County Planning Department has been evaluating all similar cases under the lens of constitutional law and has been waiving the road improvement requirements. Los Gatos appears to be the only holdout in the state still requiring infeasible and unconstitutional improvements as conditions of single-family home construction. I sincerely hope that this commission approves the Bucknights' appeal and allows them to build their single-family home. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
The next speaker will be Eugenia.
Please proceed, Eugenia.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Eugenia Gibbons, and I'm a proud Los Gatos resident and homeowner. I'm calling tonight in support of the Bucknights' appeal request. I believe that their project meets the spirit of the fire safe regulations and will improve fire safety in the area where their future home will be built. I have known Omari for more than 20 years. We went to school together. And I was thrilled when he and his family moved to Los Gatos in 2020. It's been great to have the families together again, particularly because our children attend our public Fisher Middle School together. During the time that we have lived in Los Gatos, I have become increasingly interested in the local real estate market. Los Gatos is a great town, but getting single-family homes through the approval process is known to be challenging. I feel like only the risk takers can consider building their dream home here in Los Gatos these days. Only those that can afford to buy a lot and just wait and wait for a long and painful process of approval that does not always make sense. We need to change that. I was excited when Omari and Kavita got their approval to proceed with their project back in August 2021. It came as a big surprise when I later found out that they were being blocked from building their home due to town regulations. In my opinion, asking homeowners to re-engineer a public road that they are not responsible for is not appropriate. The wood road is suitable for access, and to make things even better, the measures that the Book Knights are introducing with their approved project will improve fire safety significantly over keeping this as a vacant lot. I really hope that the Planning Commission approves this appeal tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you for your comments. Do we have anyone further on Zoom? Mr. Paulson?
Yes, the next speaker will be Eric.
Good evening, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, thanks.
Well, my name is Eric Wade. I've been a resident of Los Gatos for many years and currently living up here off of Crescent Drive. I wanted to voice my support for this application and also express my concern should this application be denied. The denial of this application by Santa Clara County Fire is not about fire safety. The fact that this application was previously approved by every department applicant requires approval from, including Santa Clara County Fire, proves this point. This meeting is about whether or not this commission believes Santa Clara County Fire is lawful in its interpretation of PRC 4290 as it relates to dead-end roads, roads too narrow, or roads too steep, and whether retroactively imposing its position on previously approved projects is appropriate. The question here does denial of this application constitute a regulatory taking? The commission has ruled that it does on all previous applications facing the same restriction. During review of previous applications brought before this commission, it has been determined that a denial of an applicant that is subject to the development restrictions noted in PRC 4290 is in fact a regulatory taking. If this commission has not already been informed, I would suggest the town attorney once again explain what a regulatory taking is and is one being imposed on the applicant. Also, I suggest the town attorney inform the commissioners of what would happen if this commission denies the application. I believe the attorney will note that the denial of this application will in fact impose a regulatory taking on the applicant. In response, the applicant will respond with a lawsuit against the town. In the end, they will win. I personally do not wish my tax dollars go towards the hiring of our town attorney to defend a decision of denial by this commission. You have or will hear from Santa Clara County Fire about the same practical effect and working with the applicant to find some suitable solutions. None of this matters. The Santa Clara County Fire has already approved the application. I do not believe it is the intent of the commission to require a rehearing of every application that is subject to changes in the regulations as they occur during the planning process in regards to Santa Clara County Fire's interpretation of 4290. As a citizen and taxpayer of Los Gatos, I respectfully request this commission make a motion of approval of this application based on the fact that a denial is in violation of the law citing the definition of a regulatory taking, and in the fact that the precedent of approval has already been set by this commission and other planning commissions in neighboring towns and cities. Thank you.
And thank you for your input.
Chair, the next speaker will be Ed.
Please proceed, Ed.
Yes, hi, thank you. My name's Ed Chow, a local resident here, and I live a few miles down the road from the applicant's proposed residence. I second the gentleman who just spoke prior to me regarding the regulatory taking. If I may just quantify, within a approximately 7-mile radius of downtown Los Gatos, we're part of a group of approximately 55 residents, all of whom are affected by PRC 4290. So, I mean, doing the math, the fiscal liability of losing a regulatory taking lawsuit would be significant, and in my view, unnecessary if the commission were to simply allow the applicant's project to go through. One thing I could add is I spoke with Edith Hannigan, who is the executive officer of the Board of Forestry, shortly after she finalized the current revision of PRC 4290. And while I've heard there's many interpretations of PRC 4290 from consultants, officials, lawyers, staff, etc., what I can offer you is that she personally told me that in no uncertain terms, local jurisdictions such as counties and city officials absolutely have the authority to grant exceptions to PRC 4290 when they deem it to be out of line with their local master plan. So she told me that because I called her upset about the lack of changes in PRC 4290, and she assured me that commissions such as the Los Gatos Planning Commission would be able to override that. And I think this is the perfect example of when we should do that. So I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant, and I hope that you'll allow common sense and logic to prevail and approve the exception. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments.
Chair, the next speaker will be David.
David, you're welcome to proceed.
David, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Chair, why don't I go to the next speaker and see if David can get that squared away.
Certainly.
The next speaker will be Vip.
Vip, are you
Yes.
you ready to
Yes.
speak? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to the commissioners for giving me a couple moments here. I'm a resident just down the road from the proposed residence for Omari and Kavita. Myself, my wife, and my family, we've been fortunate to know the Bucknights for about 15 years. And as others have commented, they are a truly wonderful family. We love spending time with them. Their boys are also wonderful, and our kids love spending time with their boys. My wife and I have just gone through the approval process for doing a remodel and addition to our home in Saratoga. And I wanted to just share maybe a couple of observations about our process. And while it took a while, as any planning process does, I think there were a couple of things that seemed really important to us in having a very good process overall. I think we found that the process and our planning and building partners from the city of Saratoga built a lot of trust with us, and a lot of that comes from consistency and how they were looking at our project, looking at the relevant regulations. And when we had question marks or we have overlapping regulations where there are differences between something from the fire department and something from the city or those sorts of things, they were able to get to practical judgment that overall our project leads to a net improvement for the neighborhood. We'll have a newer home versus what we have today. It'll be a safer home and a more energy efficient home and all of those things. So for us, we had a relatively straightforward process when we found that the planning department was very responsive and tried to help us move as quickly as possible. I think what the experience that the family here tonight has had maybe has been a little bit prolonged, and I would love for the commission to find a way to help the project move along and to approve it tonight. As Mr. Bucknight pointed out, the city of Saratoga just streamlined its approach to 4290. And I think it would be good for Los Gatos to look into doing that as well. I think this is something that affects everyone in the county, not just those in the hillside areas. And I think it would be important for Los Gatos to look into doing that. But I think ultimately, this feels like it's been an unnecessarily prolonged process for the Bucknights, and I believe that the commission should approve the appeal tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments.
Okay, Chair, we'll give David another shot.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, David.
Sorry about that. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you tonight, and I just would like to offer my support to the Bucknights. I've only known them a short time, a year or so, but I've been impressed with the manner in which they have tried everything in their power to deal with what is a difficult situation. In particular, these plans that were previously approved in the entitlement phase and backpedaled, I consider it a backtracking or backpedaling in the post-entitlement phase, is not appropriate and is a capricious application of process. I would also like to point out that if any other part of the entitlement permit phase was backpedaled in the post-entitlement phase, then I'm guessing that the Planning Commission presumably wouldn't let that happen. Another relevant point, I believe, is that this is as I'm sure you're aware, the second hearing. The first one was about the Wade family a few months ago. They were blocked by 4290. At the hearing, I believe it was Mr. Fox from the fire department. Well, first, I commented at that Santa Clara County was the only one enforcing 4290, Santa Clara County Fire. And in response, Mr. Fox, after the comment period had closed, said, actually, no, and he started listing off other jurisdictions that were enforcing this. And I have a list here. He listed off Oakland Fire. He listed off Riverside County, San Mateo Consolidated, San Mateo County, LA County, Ventura County. So first up, San Mateo County and San Mateo Consolidated is one and the same. So really there's only 5. I subsequently did a Freedom of Information request to all of these. Ventura, LA, San Mateo Consolidated, all have 0 projects that were denied based upon 4290. Meanwhile, the other 2, Riverside County, said the computer system couldn't search this, and Oakland Hills requested an extension, so still waiting to hear back. But it is simply wrong that that it is truly being applied only by our fire department, and there is no evidence that anyone else is applying it in this manner. If the Bog Nights project is not approved here tonight, then I believe we've lost our way. The laws that are crafted to protect us, if they're adhered to blindly, despite resulting in a worse fire safe outcome, then this commission would not be protecting us from wrongful interpretation of the law and would not be upholding common sense and logic. I respectfully ask that the Bog Nights project can be allowed to proceed. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I've neglected to ask my fellow commissioners on prior speakers if they had questions, but I haven't seen any hands either, so we'll proceed with the knowledge that you can do that in the future. Do we have any further members of the public participating by Zoom?
Thank you, Chair. There are currently no other hands raised, so I would suggest any folks in the room can speak, and if anyone else would like to speak on this who is participating via Zoom, please raise your hand.
Yes, I have 2 cards. The first one is from Michael Strauss. Hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Come forward and speak into the mic.
It's perfect, Chair. Hello, members of the Planning Commission, staff, and members of the public. I am Michael Strauss, and my home is on Sarah Court, where my wife and I and our 2 kids have lived for the last 7 of our 9 years living in this town. I've addressed this Planning Commission in the past on a professional basis, but I'm here tonight as a resident in support of the Bach-Knight family's appeal. I followed this saga for several years in conversations with the Bach-Knight family and can only shake my head at all the twists and turns. I would encourage this commission to grant the appeal tonight because, and I've got some bullets here, it is the fair thing to do given all the circumstances. It's practically impossible to make Wood Road fully compliant. The Bach-Knights have, in good faith, agreed to take on every reasonable mitigation. Santa Clara Fire conducted their operational assessment without incident, according to the case file. Incredibly, there's even a constitutional argument, which I'm still mystified by, but impressed by as well. And the Bach-Knights have assembled significant community support. The family has done all the right things, and I hope we can let them build their forever and very beautiful home. And so I would encourage the commission to consider the totality of the circumstances and grant the appeal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Strawn. Before you go away, I'll ask my commissioners if they have any questions. I'm not seeing any. Thank you for your comments. And we also have a card from Julie Southern. If you'd please come forward to the mic. It's going to come up in later in the mission. Yeah, got it covered. Yes, please proceed.
Hi, my name is Julie Southern. I'm at 135 Wood Road. My house burnt down on Wood Road in 1997. I did have an opportunity to meet the new neighbors, or soon-to-be new neighbors, a couple years ago. I appreciate the detail that's required to build a house or rebuild a house in Los Gatos. I appreciate the attention to detail that the fire department takes on, as well as all of the council members. I think because I am the only one on Wood Road that's being represented here, I do have a unique experience and location to the building.
If I could trouble you, since this is being recorded and televised, to speak into the mic and not to the audience.
Apologize.
Thanks so much.
I would just ask that you not take any shortcuts or exceptions in name of fire safety rather than because they're a nice family. I think I was a nice family and it took a long time to rebuild my house, so that's all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if we have no one further on Zoom and I have no further cards, then Mr. Bouknight, you're invited to come back to the mic for 3 minutes to add any further comments on the application that you may have.
Thank you. If you wouldn't mind bringing the presentation back up, that would be great. You can move to the next slide. Thank you. So this is a photo of the remnants of a fire that was started on our vacant property. This was back in November. It was started by people who I think like to walk up there and see the views up there. It's not uncommon that people trespass on the property, and this was a fire started back in November. Ironically, this happened literally just the day before the fire apparatus conducted an operational assessment. But I think it's emblematic of the contrast before you this evening. That contrast is between having a fire-safe dwelling with defensible space, significant water access, and reasonable road access, and a vacant lot at risk if exposed to the wrong spark. Next slide, please. I'd like to thank you, commissioners. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present our appeal this evening. I appreciate your service. I recognize it's a difficult job, and your engagement throughout this hearing has been great. I'm also very grateful for the significant public support we've received in writing over the last several days and poignantly vocalized this evening. We love this community. It is not happenstance that we moved to Los Gatos some years ago. As a family, we intend to make it our home for the foreseeable future. I fully acknowledge that having the opportunity to construct a home is a privilege. That privilege is the outgrowth of generational sacrifice, and our vision is to have a multi-generational home in return. Now, we have done everything the right way as we've navigated this obscure process. It has been nearly 18 months since we submitted for our grading permits in accordance with our conditions of approval, and it's time to complete that process. Tonight, I believe we have effectively demonstrated that our project aligns well with the spirit and the intent of PRC 4290 and improves fire safety in the area. I would ask that you would please approve our appeal this evening, and I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you again. And before you go, I'll ask if any commissioners now have questions for you. Commissioner Janoff.
Thank you. Excuse me, Mr. Bouknight. I wanted to thank you for a very detailed appeal. In particular, your table with the dates and events is most helpful. And I wanted to ask one question. Please. When the fire department came to you with a denial in February of 2022, well, they didn't come to you. You found out in March, but the denial was in, according to your chart, was in February. Did the fire department explain to you why they came back with a denial after they had approved your project almost a year, well, 6 months earlier?
No, they did not, but at that point, we had not had any direct conversation with the fire department. It was all through our submissions. The only direct conversation we had was during the preliminary reviews. So when we had the technical review back in June of 2021, that was the last time we had direct communication. And as mentioned in the staff report, we received an approval on June 23rd of 2021. So when the disapproval came back in February, it was a shock. We found out in March because our architect, I think, was trying to process what happened, and he passed along. He had no idea what was happening. We contacted the town. They had no idea what was happening, and we were told to wait because there are several amendments that have been going through on this law because the interpretation is up for grabs, more or less. So we waited until May because we were waiting for things to play out, and then we contacted the planning department in May. And even at that point, so this is May 2022, the planning department had no idea about PRC 4290. There's been no public discourse around the implementation of this in our town whatsoever. So we were shocked, quite honestly. Thankfully, we were able to get in touch with the fire department and work through a very long and rigorous process, but it was completely unexpected.
Thank you. I've got my answer. And just to summarize, you don't know why they came back with a denial after having approved. I mean, it came as a surprise, or there was some explanation later, but in the moment, it was nothing but surprise.
No, and I think what I documented in the communication was my assertions over and over again that we have a condition of approval. We don't understand why there could be an alteration at this point.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the appellant? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mr. Buchnight.
Thank you.
So we'll now close the public portion of the public hearing and ask if any commissioners have questions for staff. And that would include Mr. Mullen and his staff. The fire department is here to answer questions. And the town attorney is, of course, here to answer any questions of a legal nature. So, Commissioner Janoff.
Thank you. I have many questions, but I think I want to start with a question for staff. This is not the first time this issue has been brought before the Planning Commission. Even recently, we heard a similar issue regarding the PRC 4290. And our feeling at that time, when we heard all of the evidence, having listened to fire in great detail, was that there was a request beyond reasonable being made, and the Planning Commission found for the appeal. My question to staff is, given that process which happened some time ago, how is it that a family coming before the town with a similar situation how is this a surprise? And maybe more to the point, after the prior hearing where we found in favor of the appellant, for very, very similar reasons, was there any discussion around a change in process within the town to prevent this sort of thing happening again?
Gabrielle Whelan, town attorney. The state fire safe regulations set forth a very specific set of steps that are to be taken. And so we've been following those steps, which are an appeal of a determination. That said, we have learned that Saratoga and the county are considering different paths. And so we are in communication with both of those entities. And, you know, we're working on improving the process.
Anything further?
And just to follow up, I'm aware of condition 100 in the conditions of approval, which is that the trigger that created a reopening of the fire department's reassessment of this project? And the item 100 has to do with fire department approvals. So is that the clause that was reopened? Because that's sort of in the future, when you are finalizing your project, you need to adhere to those requirements of the fire department. Is that what triggered a reopening?
So when this issue arose, I reviewed the conditions of approval, and there is a very broad condition, as you noted, that says you have to comply with all regulations of any jurisdiction, of any entity that has jurisdiction over the property. And so the fire safe regulations became effective. I can't remember the exact date, but I think it was like July 1 of 2021. And that was shortly before the property owners applied for the building permit. And so that regulation applied at that time. And my reading of the broad condition is that it's broad enough to encompass application of the fire safe regulations. But in my opinion, this appeal turns on the takings issue.
Thank you. And through the chair.
Yes, please.
Planning Manager Jennifer Armour. I will also add that just like with changes to our building code, those regulations go into place. And so if the building application comes in after the new building code has been adopted, regardless of when the planning process was conducted. It is the date of the building permit application that triggers which building code applies. And so the fire code is in the same way, that those final conditions or final requirements and compliance with the applicable code have to do with the application date of the building permit.
Yes, please proceed.
Sorry. So the PRC 4290 was enacted well before July 2021. It's just that something got changed where it was beefed up or it was more focused attention. So I'm noting this date because that precedes the Planning Commission's review of this of the architectural site application. But the fire department knows about PRC 4290 because it's been in existence since 1991. Why weren't the term, and July 2021 is prior to the approval, although it's 1 month after the approval of the fire department. I'm getting kind of confused about the dates. We have knowledgeable fire department reviewers reviewing prior. It looks like in sequence. I mean, the sequence is sound in terms of having the PRC 4290 in mind, and that was in existence. They approved it in June, denied it in February a year later. This just seems very confusing to me. That if the knowledge were there, and the experts reviewing it have that knowledge to either approve or deny, and they approved it, then I'm confused why they would be permitted to reopen that conversation when the very standards that they're now denying it on were in existence prior to their original approval. Any thoughts about how that sequence? I mean, do I have it mixed up? Is there something I'm missing? Because staff, help out if you can.
Thank you. I think you have the dates in order. And to summarize, the last time prior to the Planning Commission hearing, the last time the fire department reviewed the project was in June of 2021. They issued their letter says approval, but we determined or thought of as being deemed complete for processing. That was in June 22nd, 2021. The fire safe regulations became effective in July 1st, 2021, and the Planning Commission hearing wasn't until August. The time in between June and August is the lead time needed to get a project to the Planning Commission. It can include story pole installations and certification, as you're all familiar with at this point. I can't speak to the knowledge of the fire department at the time of June of 2021. I can say that planning staff was not made aware of PRC 4290 and its application to the local responsibility area until I don't have the date in front of me, unfortunately, but it was with the previous project that you reviewed under a similar appeal when it came up during their first staff technical review under the development review process of the architecture and site application. So in this case, it was a timing issue. The fire department may have not even been aware because we had their last letter in June. Planning wasn't aware that PRC 4290 was applicable, and we took it through the Planning Commission process.
And I will add to that as well, just that it did not return to the fire department for review in that interim. So the last time they had seen it before it came to Planning Commission was in June, when the PRC 4290 did not apply to any of the lands within the town, just the unincorporated lands.
Any further questions? No. Other commissioners have questions? Yes, Commissioner Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. My first question is, and I don't know if staff will be able to answer this, but does Saratoga also contract with county fire? Like, is that part of do they have jurisdiction there?
Yes, that's true. That's correct.
And then could staff just explain why Santa Clara County Fire has jurisdiction and authority to interpret PRC 4290 in the way they do in this town? Just because I think that I know that we went over this as commissioners last time this came up, but it was a little bit confusing. So I think a review would be helpful for us in the public.
Thank you. I think the person best knowledgeable to speak to that would be Chief Estrada with the Santa Clara County Fire Department.
Mr. Estrada, do you want to come forward? Oh, you have the mic.
He has a
Very well.
microphone there.
Thank you. Yep. That sounds good.
I'd like to thank you for the question. I wanted to first, Santa Clara County Central Fire Protection District is a special fire district. We have two different types of areas that we serve, and our jurisdiction essentially comes through that fire district, and then there are contract cities. We actually are the inspecting agency for local response area. The state response area would be CAL FIRE. We in the town are the authority that basically takes the 4290 regulations. The trigger here was that when the July 1st, 2021 change occurred, we at that point started applying the code as it were, and the Board of Forestry is the one that dictated it. This really is a stepping up or an escalation of the code, and for us, effectively, we are the fire department for the town. We do both suppression and the plan review, the building side of it or the development side. Excuse me. And with that, it's similar to just about any other jurisdiction that you would follow. So we effectively are the fire department for the town. So I'd say for the actual position that we fill, I'd say you have to just look at really just any normal or other city that would have a local fire department, and effectively we are the fire district for you. And I guess there really is no more specific detail without we can get the overall contracts, but we effectively are for the county, for Los Gatos, Montessorino, Saratoga, Campbell. There's a number of them, so we just I'm sorry if that wasn't specific enough, but I just was curious. Does that
answer your question, Commissioner Thomas?
I will admit it is a little bit complicated, and it just depends whether you're within town limits or if you're actually in a state responsibility or an unincorporated county. It will also dictate who applies 4290 specifically.
Thank you. May I?
You have another question, please?
Okay, so my other question is just for staff about what other entities similar to Santa Clara County Fire have jurisdiction that's typically included in conditions of approval.
I can attempt to answer the question and then have planning manager jump in.
Examples. So
Some of the other examples, depending on the scope of the project, could be California Department of Fish and Wildlife at the state and federal level. When we get into environmental review, there could be a number of them. Santa Clara Valley Water District. Not rattling them off like I used to be able to.
There are also some in the county, so I think environmental services sometimes we'll take a look. But the standard sections of our conditions of approval are public works engineering, planning, building, and fire. And so fire really is working and serving us as a fourth department, occasionally also our police department in some cases.
Please.
And often we have the Santa Clara Valley Water District. We've seen that sometimes too. So they would operate in a similar way.
occasionally when applicable.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of staff, the fire department, or the town attorney? Yeah, please.
I do have another question for Santa Clara County Fire. I just wanted to know if you could explain what happened when you did your test. I forget what it was called, but the test run where you tried to attempt the turnaround and everything. Could you just detail the results of that for us, please?
Sure. Thanks for the question. So I wasn't present, but I did get the pass down from staff that was there and then the engine company as well. The goal of a site assessment would be for a normal fire apparatus. This would be the first two companies. So the company that would be responding if there was an emergency at that location to go out and actually drive the road. What they're looking for is the ability to access and then also be able to turn around. So they really do align with the different aspects of 4290 when it comes to the, say, road width or the ability to use or have a turnout, the length of a dead-end road and or the grade, maximum grade. So those would all affect the fire apparatus' ability to safely navigate, have simultaneous access and egress for civilian evacuation while fire resources are coming in. And then also for a dead-end road, one of the considerations that we have in place is that a fire engine will sometimes need to back out or turn around. If you don't have a turnaround, you have to back. A lot of, or very steep grade and winding and or other conditions that make it difficult to navigate can be very dangerous. And on a beautiful sunny day, it's not as difficult, although it may be challenging for the driver to actually make that or execute that backing operation. So in the event that we have weather like today or this weekend, for example, where we have debris on the road, traction issues, we have ice, we have those conditions, and or night, those are the conditions that are also to be considered. So the fire apparatus and the company, they have operational knowledge, they have local knowledge, and they apply that and give us the recommendation of whether this is a safe road to navigate. Firefighters will often say they can get it done, and this is basically what we're looking for, is we're trying to balance what is truly safe and what is achievable when it comes to accessing the road. So overall, it is them taking a close look. We also will have two vehicles go in opposite directions, usually mainly a passenger vehicle and a fire engine. Other than that, looking for clearances on both sides, taking into consideration slope, vegetation, the topography that might be the direction that fire would come from, and how your ability to actually navigate or access or even see might be affected. So there's a lot to be considered. County Fire is a very active participant in the mutual aid system. So we have a lot of people and a lot of experience with wildfire. So it's that knowledge base that we also tap into. So we also make sure that we try to balance exactly what is truly necessary without asking for something that is extraordinary. So we try to, at that point, provide or interject our discretion to figure out if we do actually have a working solution that is safe for firefighters. The only other thing that I'll take into account is that many times for a medical event, you have at least two pieces of equipment coming. That's a fire engine and an ambulance. So for those two pieces of equipment to actually turn around at the top of a dead-end hill could be challenging. A structure fire requires between probably 5 and 8 pieces of equipment, and those are all the size of a standard fire engine or larger. So with that, if you can imagine apparatus stacking up on a small inclined road and trying to all get out, especially if there was some additional fire risk that had developed or escalated, you could see that could create a very dangerous situation for first responders. So not trying to create or paint the worst picture possible, but trying to be realistic is really that what we attempt to do in a consultation on site.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, that did. We have one more follow-up.
Let's go, and then we'll proceed with Commissioner Burnett.
Thank you. Thank you. And my one follow-up to that would be, so would adding a turnaround at the front of this property's driveway improve ability to access and navigation for emergency service vehicles?
The presence of a turnout would make things better.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I want to, oh,
Your
what?
mic, please. Speaking to the mic.
Oh, how could I do that in turn? First of all, you know, I'm happy our town and the Santa Clara County Fire Department take fire seriously, because our town is very similar to Paradise, and we could burn down pretty quickly. So I know with, you know, we have changes that come up, so we're adjusting and moving forward. So a lot of times people get caught in the middle here, but I know our staff is working on it towards, you know, making good decisions. And our town safety and fire safety, I think, is the most important thing. After saying that, I know you do have, there's 4 water tanks there that contain 20,000 gallons worth of water on demand. So that's on the property. So that's comforting. And then there is a fire hydrant close on the property as well, which is connected to our waterworks. And then we have, you know, there's been some mitigation with the turnabouts. We have a turnout at the end of the driveway, and then there's a turnaround at 138 Wood Road. And then the driveway itself has another area of extension that I noticed on the map. So there's been like 4 areas of mitigation on this project regarding the fire truck and access. So those are positives. So, so you have, seems like there's a lot of water, and then the spacing, you know, the vegetation has been cut back, and, you know, I think it's a safe area there now. My question is do you have a generator? Because with our electricity problems, and what if your electricity goes out and the pump isn't working for your water for these tanks? So that would be something that would be a real important. I mean, it maybe sounds like a small thing, but it wouldn't be if there were fire going on and you needed access to those water tanks.
So thank you for that question. Commissioner Burnett, I believe you're speaking about some of the features of the architecture and site application that were approved, including water tanks for emergency use that are tied into a wharf hydrant at the top of the driveway. I personally don't have expertise on exactly how that wharf hydrant is fed, whether it requires a pump at all or if it's fed by gravity. The Chief Estrada may be able to expand upon that. And I can see if he...
Sure, I can. Without being specific to this particular project, typically it's head pressure or the water pressure that's created from the water tanks coming from above. Usually you have multiple tanks that are tied together so that you have full access to the 10,000, 20,000, whatever it is the water supply is. The wharf hydrant, which is a 2.5-inch connection, is a standard use that you might see on a regular fire hydrant. It's the smaller of the 2 sizes, and it has a capacity. In this application, a wharf hydrant or this water source would be considered a draft hydrant. So it'll, if required, because it has a rigid pipe, you would be able to pull the water out if you needed to. It's a little bit more of an involved process, but without the specifics of this particular hydrant water supply, it would be most likely a water-fed or a gravity-fed system that you would see. So it would not necessarily be reliant on a pump, but I'm not 100% sure for this project.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may, through the chair, I would like to add one more thing, that This is part of the architecture and site application that was approved. So the wharf hydrant and the water tanks were reviewed by the fire department. They're not the specific subject of tonight's appeal hearing. And they were also reviewed under the building permit application, and I believe some revisions needed to be made to increase the capacity. And no comments remain outstanding from the fire department relative to the wharf hydrant and the water tanks.
Okay, thank you. Because that, for me, that's a very important issue. I mean, if there were a fire there, your water supply and how the fire department has access for what they need. Thank you.
Any further questions by commissioners for staff, town attorney? Commissioner Janoff.
One last question, and this is regarding the turnaround that Commissioner Thomas was mentioning. For the town attorney, you mentioned that in great detail, you talk about the issue of taking and how that's an important consideration for the Planning Commission. Just wanted to clarify that in the required findings statement, excuse me, it says in order to reduce the slope of the roadway and add a turnaround, is not roughly proportional. So the two of those combined is not roughly proportional, is not recommended in your opinion. And it's not clear to me that the applicant has agreed to or offered to create a turnaround. Is that a separate issue, or are you?
I can address the issue of the turnaround to the best of my ability. A turnaround is approved at the top of the driveway, and a turnout is offered at the base of the driveway. The slopes in the area of the driveway throat where it connects to Wood Road are in the area of 17 to 18%. The maximum limit of slope in any direction for a fire truck turnaround, based on the Santa Clara County fires, I think it's detailed D1, is 5%. So in its current condition, a turnaround couldn't be introduced at the base of the driveway without significant re-engineering of that portion of the road.
Thank you.
There are no further questions from my fellow commissioners. I have a few. The first one I'd like to address to the town attorney. What would be the financial ramifications to the town if the commission were to deny the appeal?
This is hypothetical, but an aggrieved appellant could sue for a writ of mandate to have the town overturn its decision. And if they were successful, they could seek their attorney's fees and costs for the litigation. Thank you.
And also for the town attorney, with respect to the letter we have received in the packet from Mr. Mattioni's office concerning the easement litigation between Mr. Ibrahim and the Bouknights, excuse me, is this a matter to be considered by the commission tonight, or is it a private land use dispute?
In my opinion, it's a private land use dispute, but I will share that the town has conducted its own research to see if there is in fact a recorded easement, and the town was not able to locate a recorded easement in that area.
Thank you very much. And let's see here. Give me a minute. If I could have Fire respond to this question, please. There's one of the requirements that are being violated if we grant this appeal would be the requirement of a turnout at 1,320 feet. And I was wondering if you could address the policy that underlies that requirement.
Thank you for the question. So the location of the turnout,
yes.
There's a maximum distance for a dead-end road specific to the size of the parcel. And with that, the limits to how long a road can be without the ability to have a turnout or have a way to pass. That's specifically what this refers to. It's under the dead-end road and the maximums, and at that interval is the point where that opportunity to actually make that, or have that turnout is required. Is that a clear?
Well, I think I understand the regulation. What I don't understand is what the underlying purpose is. For example, does it relate to the length of fire hoses or other conditions?
It would be more related to the simultaneous access egress. That would be the resident or any other member of the community being able to evacuate safely at the same time that fire apparatus are coming through. So, for example, if there were a pinch point or an area that was harder to navigate, this allows for that pass to actually happen without necessarily requiring that both vehicles are moving at the same time. Competent drivers would be able to navigate that safely, and basically both access and egress could be accomplished.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So if there are no further questions, please proceed.
Thank
Commissioner
you,
Thomas.
Chair. I think that I have a follow-up question, because I think that based on Commissioner Janoff's question that I might have accidentally said turnaround when I was referring to the turnout that they planned, so thank you for catching that. But I do have a question for Chief Estrada. Would the turnout that is proposed at the start of the driveway at Wood Road, which is at the 1,633 feet from South Santa Cruz Road, would that improve access and turnaround ability for emergency vehicles?
Yes, a turnout in just about any location would be an improvement. So I would say yes to that question.
No further questions? Okay, so at this time I would invite comments from the commissioners or possibly a motion if we're at that point. Commissioner Resby.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to thank the applicant and his supporters for, as my fellow commissioner noted, a very thorough and persuasive presentation. I'd also like to thank staff and Chief Estrada and his staff. I think it appears that everybody's using their best efforts in what can best be called a confusing and evolving situation as we all work through it. So thank you all for your efforts. And I think we all appreciate 4290 and its intent, that is to create defensible space. As we've noted, and as one neighbor has noted, we are in an extremely dangerous and perilous area, and so anything we can do to protect ourselves, I think, is a worthy goal. Unfortunately, I think the application of 4290 in this case is working an undue burden on the applicant. And what 4290 is asking us to do is create defensible space to the extent we can, and I think the solution that's been proposed does that to the greatest extent possible. To ask otherwise would be to ask applicant to completely redo Wood Road at extraordinary expense, and to me that feels like an undue burden. And so my feeling is, based on everything that's been presented tonight and in the packet, I would be inclined to grant the appeal as presented this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Further comments? We'll start with Commissioner Clark.
Thank you. I agree with Vice Chair Raspy. I support the appeal. I have a few reasons along with what was already stated, but I want to start by saying I really do feel like everyone's done everything in their power to make this work, and I think that it unfolded in a really unfair way and was completely out of the applicant's control the way that the timeline happened, and I don't think that there's anything that they really could have done differently, but I also have a few specifics. So like with the turnaround concern, I think the example of the lot catching fire is a good example of the fact that even without a home there, that is a problem. And in a way, at least having someone there could help. And also the fact that there would at least be improvements to the space. That makes me feel like it could actually be beneficial to have this property there. The operational assessment, even though it was done in good weather, the fact that it was successful, I find pretty persuasive and promising. And to me, the biggest thing is the fact that I think it does constitute a taking if we were to not grant the appeal, because it's just completely impossible. There was no feasible or reasonable remedy, and I feel like every option was explored. So I think that it would be unfair not to grant this appeal tonight.
Thank you for those comments. Commissioner Janoff again.
Thank you. Excuse me. Yes, I'm in agreement with the comments that have been made so far. Excuse me. And I would like to also add that the Santa Clara County Fire Department is doing its job. It's working through these regulations and applying them as carefully and fairly and unbiased way as possible. So I appreciate that that work has been done, but there has to be something different in the process of approval or denial of an exception that helps a homeowner go through this process in a more expeditious fashion. One of the other issues that came up, and I know this is a different issue when we're hearing it new, but one of the concerns that came up when this PRC 4290 came before us before was the issue of, does it apply to a new development or an existing development? And that was a big issue for us, and we could understand why this would be applied to new developments. But as I was driving in and my map is illuminated, I'm looking at all these twisty, turny roads going up College Avenue, and I'm thinking, this is not an applicable set of laws or regulations in a constructive way to a very large portion of roads in Los Gatos. So I had a concern coming in that we are, if fire's going to make their determination, and they should make it black and white. That's the way it works. That's good. But somewhere there has to be some application of reasonability, and whether that determination applies to all roads in all areas of Los Gatos uniformly. And it just can't. I think that's the determination that we reached last time. It's the determination that I've reached today. It's well meant, and we do appreciate it because we do live in a high fire just about everywhere in town. So we understand that, but in this case, I can't see the denial making practical sense for all of the reasons mentioned. So I'm in support of of granting the appeal, but I would also ask that staff do something in terms of the process of review that doesn't create this months that amount to over a year-long delay, which seems very convoluted and confusing, trying to sort out what can or can't be done or what is or isn't allowed. There seems to be a practical application to this, and perhaps it's the question of taking that should come in earlier to the process of decision-making. But I would recommend that staff, regardless of what the Planning Commission determines on this application, that staff do something to address the process to make sure that we don't get in this kind of loop in future applications, because I think we're going to see this again.
Thank you. Other comments?
Through the chair.
Oh, go ahead, please.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to. I had one thing I did want to make clear here. There was the operational assessment. I want to make sure the outcome and our position was clear. I do want to thank the Buck Knights for staying engaged. They have been very engaged, and we have gone through multiple iterations. 4290 has been frustrating for just about everyone, especially since the recent change in July of 21. So with the proposed appeal, the contents of the appeal and our operational assessment, the turnout on the driveway, additional mitigations that we've arrived at even before we reached the appeal, they're all contained within the proposal or the appeal as written. From an operational standpoint, Santa Clara County Fire does not have an operational objection to the appeal as written. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear with the commission, because I know your position is very difficult here, and the gravity of this situation is really it's lives. So we want to make sure that you understand that clearly, and I didn't want to misrepresent our position for this project.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that input. Well, if there's no other comments by Commissioners, I'd like to add my support for the appeal, primarily based on the recommendation of staff, which is in turn based on the town attorney's recommendation or finding that this would be an unlawful taking and the financial repercussions to the town would be enormous. And so I think it would be appropriate to ask for a commissioner to make a motion at this time. Commissioner Janoff.
I'll make a motion. I move to grant the appeal of a Santa Clara County Fire Department decision denying a request for an exception to the state minimum fire safety regulations on property zoned HR 5, APN 510-47-045, and this is 144 Wood Road, building permit application B22-0025. I can make the required findings for CEQA. I can make the required findings for granting an appeal of a Santa Clara County Fire Department decision denying an exception to the fire safe regulations as documented in Exhibit 2. And my motion would include the amendments to the conditions of approval as provided in Exhibit 3.
Thank you. And do we have a second? Commissioner Thomas.
I second the motion.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Vice Chair Raspy.
Yes.
Commissioner Burnett.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark.
Yes.
Commissioner Janoff.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, so the matter passes unanimously. Thank you all for your participation on that matter.
And through the chair, I will read the appeal rights.
Oh, please.
The decision of the commission can be appealed to town council by any interested person as defined by town code, section 2910-020, within 10 days on forms available online with fees paid. Final deadline is 4 p.m. on the 10th day.
Thank you, Ms. Armour. We'll take a brief pause before we proceed with item number 5. Okay, so next on our agenda tonight is item 5. This is a request for approval for construction of a new commercial building, a formula retail business, Whole Foods, greater than 6,000 square feet, a merger of 2 lots into one, a variance from the required number of parking spaces, and the removal of large protected trees on property zone CH, located at 15,600 and 15,650 Los Gatos Boulevard, APN 424-14-028 and 036. Per staff, the project is categorically exempt pursuant to the CEQA guidelines, section 15332, infill development projects. The property owner / applicant is Steve Lynch, Sand Hill Property Company, and the project planner is Ms. Schutman. Ms. Schutman, would you please proceed with the presentation?
Shall we ask for
Have a show of hands
disclosures,
for those who
please?
have visited? And a disclaimers, or recusals we have. Yes. Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do live within the this project is within my 500-foot radius, so I will need to be recusing myself.
Thank you. And Commissioner Clark?
Yeah, I unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, live too close to this potential Whole Foods, so I can't participate in this conversation either.
Well, thank you both for your participation so far this evening. So Ms. Schutman, would you please prepare with us with the presentation of the staff report?
I will, thank you. Before you tonight is a request for construction of a new one-story commercial building totaling 40,170 square feet. The subject property is located on the east side of Los Gatos Boulevard at the intersection of Los Gatos Boulevard and Los Gatos Almaden Road. The project site is comprised of 2 separate parcels that in total are approximately 2.79 acres and are presently vacant but were previously occupied by an auto dealership. The proposed project would comply with the town's required setbacks, lot coverage, and height requirements for the zone. The consulting architect's report noted that the design would differ from most of the newer commercial projects along the boulevard, however, found that the project is well designed and in the spirit of the commercial design guidelines. The applicant modified the design to address 3 of the 4 recommendations while providing justification for not including the 4th. The applicant is also requesting approval of a conditional use permit for a formula retail use greater than 6,000 square feet for the proposed Whole Foods use. Lastly, the project is requesting a variance from the town code for the required number of parking spaces for a retail or commercial store. The applicant is proposing 164 parking spaces, whereas 171 are required. The variance request has been outlined in greater detail in pages 10 and 11 of your report, as well as the applicant's justification and Exhibit 6. A traffic impact analysis was prepared for the project to identify any potential impacts from the proposed use. The report found no significant impacts from the proposed project, and the recommendations contained within this report are included as Condition 50 in the conditions of approval this evening. Staff is supportive of the applications, however, staff was unable to make the findings for granting of the variance and therefore cannot recommend approval of the applications without either a modification to the gross floor area of the building or the number of parking spaces provided to comply with the town's requirements, and is therefore recommending denial of the applications. There were a desk item and addendum report distributed to the Planning Commission with additional public comments that the town received. This completes staff's presentation, but planning staff, Parks and Public Works staff, and the town's traffic consultant, TJKM, are all here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for that presentation, and I'll ask commissioners if they have any questions for Ms. Schutman at this time. Commissioner Jenoff.
Yes, thank you. This is related to the draft housing element. Is this location on the site's inventory that's in the draft housing element?
Thank you for the question. It's not.
Thank you.
And Ms. Schutman, I had one question. The only issue related to the application that's before the commission tonight is the variance related to the 7 parking spaces that are unavailable.
All applications are actually before the commission tonight, so there is an architecture site application, a subdivision application, a conditional use permit application, and a variance application.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Okay, so may I have a show of hands of commissioners again who have seen the property? And are there any disclosures? Seeing none. So we'll now open the public portion of our public hearing tonight and give the applicant an opportunity to address the commission for up to 5 minutes. And please state your name and address.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commission. My name is Steve Lynch. I am with Sand Hill Property Company. For those of you that are not aware, we've had some projects over the course of time in the town. One is the Netflix campus. Another one is the development at Blossom Hill, the Super Duper Burger area. And then most recently is our Palo Alto Medical Foundation building, PAMF on Los Gatos Boulevard. So I will, for the sake of time, turn it over to Ken Rodriguez, who is our architect and master planner, to talk through the design of the building.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ken Rodriguez. I'm an architect. I have been doing work in the community since 1978. Joel, if we could run through some slides, and I would get to the rendering slides, and any of these we can go back to if the commission has comments, but just in an effort of time, we only have 5 minutes. So what we've tried to do with this building is take the types of materials, as the architectural advisor had mentioned, that are very consistent in the community. Having done quite a few buildings here, I think the cut stone, the integral colored hand-troweled plaster walls, the wood siding, as well as a great amount of trellis elements that occur on the building, I think are going to be a really positive visual piece, not to mention the landscaping that would all be growing up and over many of those design features and elements, trellises. And we've also included large glass element, very different for a typical grocery store, all along Los Gatos Boulevard, to be very transparent, be able to see, project light, project sunlight into the building to try to make the building very light. If we could go to the next slide. We're proposing an outdoor patio that energizes the boulevard, both from a pedestrian and bicycle standpoint. Whole Foods prepared food area would be located right off the boulevard here where this tower is, outdoor seating, the wood trellis elements that I was talking about, and then an entire, next slide, outdoor sales area. Again, a large, expansive one of over 20 feet deep, much different than what they currently have, although I know many of you are aware there is seasonal sales at Whole Foods, but this would be something that would be a consistent element for them, and again, encourage pedestrian traffic, bicycle traffic. And last, we placed the building up on the street edge per the design guidelines and the architectural advisor's recommendation. Parking is screened at the rear, and Steve can talk a little bit more right now about that parking.
Thank you.
Yes, just to briefly address the parking variance request. So when staff reviewed the project, overall they found no significant impact from this project whatsoever. In fact, they found the architecture met the town's guidelines. They found that the use met the Los Gatos Boulevard policies for having a use in this area. And generally, it was just a desirable use for the community. And I want to pause briefly on the environmental review. So this is a Category 32 exception, and that's actually very rare. In fact, the Category 32 you can really only ever use when not only do you find no possible impact, but there's no perceived impact of the project at the outset. And the environmental review also looked at the parking as a part of the analysis. So by saying that, where I'm moving to is the issue of parking is not a project impact. It's not really an impact at all. It really is just a conflict with the town's code. And the town's code in this case is fairly antiquated, I will say. So by my research, it looks like it was part of the original parking adoption in roughly 1968. While there's been certainly some additions and some changes to the code over time, this portion of the commercial guidelines, or the commercial parking code, I should say, really has not been changed since. And when we had the town's transportation traffic engineer review this, we had our own transportation engineer write the report for it, that's Hexagon, as well as the town's consulting engineer, TJKM. When they all reviewed this parking variance, all felt that it could be justified. So we're talking we're 7 spaces short, which is 4% of our overall parking count. The town's rate is 1 space per 235 square feet. Just by easy measure, most of the cities around here use a rate of 1 per 330 or 1 per 250, so 4 per 100 or 3 per 100, or per 1,000, I should say. And of course, our neighboring city, San Jose, last summer abandoned all parking maximums for virtually all projects, which is a pretty extreme example, not something I would necessarily suggest here. But by saying that, I'm just saying that we don't want to be building unnecessary fields of parking for no reason. So I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about variance if you can yield a few minutes. So.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Rodriguez or Mr. Lynch? Commissioner Respi.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm not sure which one of the applicant speakers wants to speak. I have a couple of questions with respect to parking. As you indicate, the number of allocated parking spaces is dictated in large measure by the square footage of the development. Since we're so close, 7 spaces, was there ever a consideration or a thought to just reduce the overall square footage of the project in order to avoid the variance?
Significant discussion surrounding that. In fact, the building size today at about 40,170 is actually a direct result of the amount of parking that we were able to have on site. So our new tenant here is Whole Foods. So their existing store is a little over 20,000 square feet today. Most of their stores are much, much larger. So if I can answer the long question, apologize, this is not informative to what you're asking. So just by way of example, so your nearest Whole Foods, the one is on Blossom Hill over at Almond Expressway, that's about 60,000 square feet. The other one at Cupertino on Stevens Creek is 75,000. That's actually a store that we built and still own. And the only other new Whole Foods that I had a chance to look up was the downtown one. It's on the Alameda in San Jose. And so they're 40,060 square feet, so almost exactly what this building is. And they have 140 parking spaces. So Whole Foods right now is not interested in dipping below the 40,000 foot mark. And they're basing that off of that downtown, the downtown Whole Foods. So it's a smaller Whole Foods, but it's in a much higher urban area. It's actually close to where I live in San Jose. So all the high density around there, including the downtown, actually are their customers for that shop. So it came to the point where Whole Foods at least is saying they don't believe for this location they need more than 140 parking spaces. So when they hear 171 or even 164, they're seeing excess parking out there. They're sort of seeing that as electric vehicle recharging spots or bike parking, or how can they repurpose some of these spaces that they don't believe they'll ever use. So it came to the point just from the tenant's criteria that they do not want to dip below 40,000. It's just not what they're interested in.
I appreciate that. And
So.
if I can answer one follow-up question.
Please do.
You raise Whole Foods in your answer. And as I understand from reading the materials, one of your justifications for reduced parking requirement is that Whole Foods has a robust home delivery system.
Correct.
All that presupposes, of course, that it will be Whole Foods in there. What is the nature of Whole Foods' commitment to this location? Do we have a signed lease? Do we have a binding letter of intent? And I just want to make sure that as we progress, that
We have a signed lease.
signed lease. Okay.
It's contingent upon approval.
Thank you for your, I appreciate it. Thank you. No further.
Anything further? Mr. Lynch, before you sit down, I may have a couple questions for you. Your traffic management plan is discussed in the staff report, discusses public transportation in that area, and I think there's a bus stop right in front of the property. And was your intent to say that bus transportation would be used more by employees of the store or by the public?
So a TDM in this case would probably address employees from a transportation perspective, right? So that it's difficult to sort of bend the public sort of habits and how they go to a grocery store. But one nice thing about a TDM is you can kind of sort of come up with a cafeteria plan of options to reduce those trips. And when the TDM plans are laid out, there may be 7 or 8 different ideas that are in there. And then at the end, usually there's sort of an annual follow-up in terms of reporting of what's working and what's not working. It usually goes for 5 years or so. And the nice thing about that is because what's not working, let's say we have some bus subsidies for employees and the employees just simply aren't taking advantage of that. Those dollars can be changed into something a little bit different. And there are some ways in terms of customer demand, because that's certainly the driver for the parking, it's not necessarily the employees. But something like, bike and ped, and in Los Gatos, e-bikes, which are incredibly popular here. There's some new TDM measures coming up in terms of e-bike charging stations, e-bikes, making them, safe, secured parking, things like that. So in terms of a customer TDM, that's probably what we'd be looking at, something in that order.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep.
And is there any actual metrics available regarding the success of transportation management plans at the other Whole Foods in the area that you mentioned?
I'm not sure specifically about Whole Foods or if they even have TDM, but there's significant data on the success of TDM in virtually every city around, including, I know we have a former City of Mountain View employee where Mountain View is really pushing the envelope on a lot of this. They have some projects, they have 45% trip reductions that they say are in fact working. So, and that's significant. That's half the trips. So in this case, we're looking at 4%. So I feel pretty confident that we can achieve that pretty easily. So.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, if there are no further questions for the applicant by the commission members, I'll ask, move on to the public portion of the public hearing and ask if there are any members of the public who are participating tonight by Zoom who wish to speak on this matter.
Thank you, Chair. The first speaker will be Jim. Jim, you're unmuted. You can go ahead and speak. I'm not hearing Jim, Chair, so I'm going to remove his permission and move to the next speaker, which is Catherine Summers.
Good evening, Planning Commission. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Not sure what happened to Jim there. He's got to come back. All right. And so it begins. My name is Catherine Summers. I'm the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm here representing the entire Chamber membership and our board. We've long reimagined Los Gatos Boulevard. And at one time, I believe there was a plan actually sort of outlining, and we had renderings of what maybe the boulevard would look like someday. And that aside, we don't have that anymore. But I ask you tonight, what will or what should the boulevard look like 20 years from now? What is possible? Obviously, we somehow have to connect those 40 floating acres out there near Highway 85 into that vision. And as you may know, there's a lot of talk amongst the property owners along the boulevard right now. People are selling, they're trading, they're taking over their land leases. So I implore you to understand that the time is now. We have to stay ahead of what we want to see out there and keep some control. And that is where you all come in. This particular project offers so much, but most importantly, it is an anchor on which others can begin to dream and plan. And that is my first point. My second point is that that site has been vacant since I moved here almost 12 years ago. We are better than that. Los Gatos, we have to activate that boulevard. The potential sales tax revenue speaks for itself. And we all know that our budget is facing a deficit. That project is the necessary starting point to an economic boon on the boulevard. Again, I'll mention the discussions amongst all the property owners out there and all who are considering projects right now. They need the assurance that our town is committed to some of this progress, evolution, smart growth, affordable housing opportunities, and transportation. The Sandhill Group has proven themselves over and over again, and they have also done extensive research. They've reached out to the Chamber of Commerce numerous times to see how we feel about the project, and they've talked to the neighboring residents and businesses. They have been met with mostly positive support, which we love. This is a huge opportunity that we cannot pass up. Let's go, approve it tonight. Do not waver like we did on the Hero Ranch site, among others. Let's break ground tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. And questions by the commissioners? Seeing none, thank you for your comments.
The next speaker will be Nick.
Good evening. My name is Nick Lampson. I am with McCarthy Ranch, a local developer and property owner in town. Our office is located in downtown Los Gatos, where we also own 4 additional properties. And then we also own a property across the street from this site. So I wanted to come on tonight and express my support of the Whole Foods project. I think this development will play a vital role in the town's overall vision of the revitalization of this Los Gatos Boulevard corridor. And in this particular site, I mean, everyone who knows Los Gatos knows that it has been sitting vacant for quite some time. And this project is an opportunity to transform that vacant lot into a vibrant retail center that'll serve the surrounding residents. And I think it's also important to note, you know, with the North 40 development down the street, which is bringing in new residents to the town. I mean, I think this kind of serves as another draw to this area. I mean, not only for the new development, but for all the residents, or residents kind of around in the surrounding neighborhoods. So I think, you know, overall, it just brings a very positive vision to this area. And I think everyone really benefits from this project. That's everyone from the town of Los Gatos, property owners, and most importantly, the residents. It feels like this is a very important step towards the overall redevelopment of the area. And, you know, with this project, I think it will allow for a lot more to follow to kind of complete that overall revitalization. So I think it's a very strong project, and I think everyone would love to see it get done. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Next speaker will be Jim. And I'll say Jim Foley since we have two Jims.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Planning Commission. Jim Foley. I'm a local business owner and resident. In fact, about a decade ago, I was part of a group that was looking at a similar development for the site here, and Whole Foods was a name that had come up. So this is something that I think has been contemplated for a really long time, and I'm glad to see that there's others that think so, and that it appears to be a really good fit for this location. I don't think that's in question. Just to add some background, I mean, at the time and over the course of the past decade, there's been a lot of conversation among the community about, you know, what is happening with Whole Foods. We see, as you know, Steve Lynch mentioned, there's, you know, bright, shiny new Whole Foods in neighboring communities out in Almaden and out in Cupertino. And Los Gatos continues to wonder when we're going to get an upgrade. And obviously timing plays a big role in everything. So I think we're fortunate enough to have this project in front of us right now. And I know there's tremendous community support, and I imagine you all do too. I don't think that's really what's in question here. Both of the prior speakers mentioned a lot about vitality on the boulevard. I completely agree. There's a lot of changes that are going to happen out there. And so that's something that's going to be coming up to you again and again. I think making some smart decisions and some tough decisions is something that we're going to really appreciate all the effort that you put in on. I think there's a big picture, you know, a big picture kind of look at this. You know, what are we talking about? Mr. Lynch talked a lot about transportation. He did a tremendous amount of research, and things are changing, excuse me. And over time, I think we're going to see projects unfold on the boulevard that just look a little bit different and don't necessarily fit in the traditional boxes that you're used to looking at. So, you know, a little variance on parking here or there that makes this project work. I know that variances are, you know, things that are hard to consider, but it should be considered, and it's something that I think the community expects Los Gatos to, you know, say, okay, there's a practical limitation here. We've got an outstanding developer, an excellent architect, and one of the best operators around, and they're all telling us that this is how to make this project work. I think that we need to listen to that, and Los Gatos, starting with the Planning Commission and the staff, needs to kind of figure out a way to make the project go and figure out a path to yes. So hopefully all of that, the background and, you know, the things that you've heard tonight are influencing you in that direction. I would hate to see, you know, this project and others that follow run into challenges that cause delays. Delays are a big problem, and I think Los Gatos is trying to be more open for business. So hopefully you can take that constructively and approve the requests that are before you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foley.
Thank you, Chair. So there are no more hands raised, although if Jim Barth would like to give it another shot, he has raised his hand, so we'll give that another shot, and looks like a couple more hands. So Jim, if you want to unmute yourself, you have 3 minutes.
Got a problem there.
Audio is still not working, Jim. You might want to try to jump off and jump back on, and we'll go to the next speaker, which is, 1 second. Alok, you will be the next speaker.
Are you able to hear me, please?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, commissioners. I'm in favor of the project. I've been in communication with the team at Los Gatos. And the only point that I had was, which I think was said very nicely, that if we look at it from a longer term perspective on how we plan to develop the town, I think that it's imperative that we encourage pedestrians, bicyclists, and try and make that be a priority. And the inputs that have already been sent in writing is this project, with some modifications which they should consider, can have a much more friendlier access to pedestrians as well as bicyclists coming in from the manor, the Los Gatos manor, and having Los Gatos Almaden not get chock-a-block because they're using that as a location for where they have their trucks coming in and out, and dedicating that to pedestrians and bicyclists. So that's primarily what I needed to say, and that's been sent in writing as well.
Thank you so much for your comments.
Chair, the next speaker will be Gail.
Hello, this is Chris Zahler. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for your time. My name is Chris Zahler. My family lives right across from the proposed Whole Foods driveway off Los Gatos Almaden Road. Had a couple concerns I'd like to see addressed if we could. I feel we're a little late to this discussion, but was told that this is the time to give feedback. The concerns I see are namely the shipping receiving area and the Los Gatos Almaden Road driveway. The shipping receiving area for the Whole Foods will greatly increase the noise and the disturbances at our property and the neighbors around us. Cars, trucks, delivery vehicles, they'll all be coming in and out of that driveway, idling. You'll hear garbage compactors. And this is right across the street from us. The proposed delivery truck shipping receiving area is kitty corner. We find it unbearable to imagine the disturbances from the delivery trucks and garbage trucks we'll have to endure very early in the morning and all throughout the day. So since it is close to our house, we're able to hear the backup beeping of the trucks, the idling vehicles, the truck refrigerator running as they're idling. These noises include the vibrations from the idling trucks, and these noises can penetrate our house. We've had to deal with this quite often, and this would increase it. And it's a constant disturbance throughout the house, right by the shipping receiving area, right in this intersection here. The other thing is the driveway off Los Gatos Almaden is adding a lot more. It'll add a lot more congestion to that intersection. This intersection creates confusion and driving risks for the existing neighbors and patrons of the shopping center. I have witnessed multiple accidents at this intersection just within the last couple of years. It seems like it's more so often than not. Our driveway is just off of Peach Blossom, is very close to this intersection, and it is quite hard to get in and out of our driveway. This would actually create more disturbance and an unsafe manner for us to get in and out. I think drivers are very impatient coming in and out of the shopping area and through this intersection. It's a cut through our neighborhood, so it's going to add quite a bit more, especially when you have those trucks going through. I will say Whole Foods does seem like a good fit for this property. It's a very nice design. I don't have any issues with the development itself. I simply would like to see a location change for the shipping receiving area and a location change for the driveway off of Los Gatos Almaden Road to free up the intersection and to help traffic through that area. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments.
All right, hopefully third time's a charm. Jim Barth, let's give it one more shot.
Well, can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can, sir.
Wow, how about that?
Good to hear from you.
This is Jim Barth, and my wife and I own an apartment building on Carlton Avenue, which is one street away from Los Gatos Boulevard. And we are delighted with this opportunity to have Whole Foods this close to all the residents on Carlton. Carlton is basically all condos and apartments. There are a lot of people in walking distance from that facility. That looks like a great facility. And I'm a little disappointed that town staff couldn't see beyond the -7 spaces, because I'm sure that that formula was based on a lot of things in the past, but we have a lot of residents living within walking and biking distance of the boulevard here, particularly right at that location. So it seems to me that they're going to have vacant parking spaces, particularly when I compare this facility to the one that they currently have. So I like the design, I like everything about it, and I'm in full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barth.
Chair, there are no more hands raised on Zoom.
Thank you, Mr. Paulson. And so we'll proceed to the speaker cards that we've received, starting with Gary, is it Larson? Am I close? Lehman?
I'm the landscaper.
Yes, please.
So he's with the applicant's team, Chair.
Oh, I see.
So you can put him with the applicants.
I'm available to answer any questions.
We'll see if we come back to you after the other speakers.
Very good, thank you.
Oh, I see. I'll keep him at the pen. And then John and Yvonne Zavashi.
My name is John Zavishi, and my wife and I own an apartment at 105 Carlton, which is immediately behind the proposed shopping center. And the reason I'm here is to appeal to save this enormous oak tree that is 12 feet away from the fence of our property. We have owned that property for 38 years, and it was a massive tree at that time. And now it's even much larger. To give you an idea how big this tree is, 3 feet high from the ground, its diameter is 28 and almost half inches. It provides shade for our tenants, and I speak on behalf of 10 tenants that we have. And I'm asking that this tree be saved. It's a shame to cut something like this down. It must be at least 130, 140 years old. Our tenants like to have it. It throws a wonderful shade summer times at the property. I do not oppose the project that is Sand Hill, and I welcome that. I think it's a great addition to that area that for the longest time has been a shelter for the homeless people, urinating, defecating, and our tenants complaining, and I'm sure the city has heard about that. The other issue that I wanted to bring out is the number of parking spaces. I shop both at the one in Los Gatos at the present time, and I live in Saratoga by the Cupertino. In Cupertino, at least 30 to 40% of the parking spaces are unutilized. And I've been there on Fridays. Yesterday, I was over the one on Los Gatos Boulevard. Even though there are other tenants there, there was 20 empty parking spaces there. I've also been there on Friday night. So I don't know who stated that this formula of the parking ratio or the slots is necessary. I don't think at the present time that applies. People seem to buy online and things of that nature. So that was my appeal, and I hope that you consider that. And I have shared this with them already. And it may sacrifice 2 parking spaces at most. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have, is it Mariad Chavez? I butchered your first name. You can correct it when you're up at the mic. Mauricio?
Yes, sir. It happens quite often.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Mauricio Chavez, and I am an organizer for the Northern California Carpenters Union. I was selected to represent almost 37,000 union members in Northern California and 4,000 union members here in Santa Clara County. I started with a non-union contractor. When I got out of the Army, I didn't know what to do with my life, so I picked up construction. He fired me. He knew that I wanted to start a family, but he knew that he couldn't pay me a living wage. He couldn't provide benefits. He couldn't help me start my family. So he let me go. The young lady I was dating at the time told me, you need to do something with your life or I'm gonna walk. I hopped on Google, looked up apprenticeships, found Helmets to Hard Hats, a program for veterans to get into the trade unions. 2 weeks later, I was making more money than I had ever made in my life. That was going on 13 years ago. The apprenticeship that we progress through until we become a journeyman teach us not just how to build, not just how to pour footings and do concrete and create buildings, but forge lifetime relationships that carry us through our day-to-day and our darkest times. The medical benefits that we receive as union members are insurmountable. My son has ADHD, and before we knew it, he was getting in trouble all the time at school, getting sent home, but we were able to get him the help that he needed through Kaiser. He's been on his medication now for going on 2 months and has had a complete 180 turnaround. Like, just perfect days, not getting in trouble. I'm not getting phone calls, and that's all thanks to the great benefits that we get through the work hours that we work through the union. The retirement package that we have allows me to retire with dignity in 20, 25 years, give or take. I have a friend of mine when I worked at Kaiser who joined the trades too late, and he dropped dead of a heart attack right there in Kaiser in the morning. So we believe that all working people have a right to a good job with benefits, a living wage that can support a family, security and dignity in the work and retirement, a safe and secure workplace, education and training to reach our full potential through an accredited apprenticeship, and with rights come responsibilities, being productive, efficient workers, producing the highest work quality work that we can stand behind, improving our communities, helping fellow workers, unionized and non-unionized, achieve safety and security in the workplace, and being active citizens and informed voters. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chavez. Our next speaker is Michael Strauss again.
Hello, Commissioners, again. It's nice to speak to you on this item as well. 9-year resident, as I mentioned earlier. My Sarah Court home is an easy walk, just over half a mile from this Whole Foods location. My wife and I and our family couldn't be more thrilled to welcome Whole Foods in a full-size store to the neighborhood as quickly as possible. I look at the potential deficiency of 6 spaces or 7 spaces over the 100 out of the 171 is effectively compliant. The town should look at reducing the parking ratios anyway, and we just couldn't be more thrilled to welcome this great project by this world-class developer and an exceptionally stellar design team. So thank you so much for your consideration this evening.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker will be Julie Merrick.
Hi, I'm Julie Mersick. I sent some comments a year ago to the planning department about this project as soon as I heard something was going on. Unfortunately, I was never able to connect directly with the developer, although I left messages to try and engage with the development. My issue is with the wall that we're creating all the way up the boulevard and around the corner on Los Gatos Almaden. And think about it in terms of if you go up to the intersection of Los Gatos Boulevard and Blossom Hill and think about those four corners and what's there. So what we're kind of creating is similar to the Starbucks, Caremore, Urgent Care, where the Bevmo just went in. So that area is not really pedestrian friendly per se. It's a sidewalk. It's got some grass, but there's no engagement with what's there. That building is just a flat, a front. And even though this is well designed with nice landscaping, there's no engagement. Like if you go across the street to Leicester Square where the Phil's is, you can sit at that intersection at any time, and there's always activity in that carved out patio there on the weekends, families coming in and whatnot. It's a community gathering spot. And I think there's an opportunity here to do something similar, but in a more visible point towards the corner. I don't like that all that frontage is not connecting to people. It's just a wall. I sit in that left turn lane daily to turn on to Las Gatos Almaden. And it's just, you're just kind of creating this visual straight up. The other thing is this thing with the oak trees. I learned the hard way that, there's a big difference between, I know somebody commented on the magnolia trees and losing those. Our coast live oaks, those are the slow growers. You can plant it when you're born, and maybe by the time you're our age, it's going to look like something. They take forever. So I hate to see there's a oak tree, I believe, that would be taken out with the double left turn lane that you're going to put in. Does that sound right?
To address the commission, please.
Yeah. Well, the double left turn lane that you're proposing, I believe the oak tree would come out and to create that. That's in the middle of that intersection right now on Las Gatos Almaden. And in addition, this other oak tree that's in the parking lot. I think those are worth trying to keep. That whole Las Gatos Almaden used to be heritage oaks at one time, so it's worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Gary Colsott.
Good evening, Planning Commission. I wanted to express my support for this project. I think it's going to be a huge step in the overall transformation of Los Gatos Boulevard. I really commend Ken Rodriguez and his team. I think the architecture is fabulous. It's fresh, it's exciting, it's forward-thinking, which is what the boulevard should be. The siting of the building being close to the sidewalk is really what we should be doing, and we should have been doing it 30 years ago instead of seas of parking lots. So this is really on point for today and the future. I have it on really good authority that Whole Foods has been looking at doing this for over 10 years. They were looking at the Paul Swanson Ford site before 2014 and the recession. And so we really deserve a better Whole Foods. And I just really want to commend Sandhill Properties for putting this presentation and this application forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And our final speaker is Julie Merrick. Did we do her early? Okay. Did I miss anyone in the audience? Doesn't look like it. So at this time, we'll call on the applicant again to respond to any of the matters or present new issues for up to 3 minutes.
Not a specific response, so I don't want to just drone on and on. There were a lot of good comments we heard. We did hear something about the trees, which we have gone to great extent to save as many of the trees on site as we can. One of the issues with that is a lot of the trees are planted as parking lot trees. When this was, this was Los Gatos Chevrolet, I think back in the day, Anderson Chevrolet, as I'm being told. So a lot of these were sort of planted, sort of catch as catch can, when they had sort of open areas here and there and just sort of patches of ground they can work with. In terms of some of the street trees we've heard about, some of them are worth saving, some of them are not. Unfortunately, this site, which has been owned by another property owner since about 2012, has had not just deferred maintenance, it's had no maintenance. I mean, we can see it from these buildings. We bought the site about a year ago, put up the bollards, tried to lock it down to try to keep everybody out as best we can. It has been an ongoing issue with homeless. There are homeless in town here. It's pretty amazing how they're sort of all attracted to this one site. But in terms of the trees, there's no irrigation, there's no watering. Many of them are incredibly root bound, even though they are large size. We're just seeing this as the right time to begin to look at a redevelopment on that. One of the issue with the oak tree in the back that John spoke about, it is a big tree. It's not quite that old, but it is a significant size tree. One of the issues with the grade on this property is we're actually lowering the grade in the back, and we're going to be raising the grade a little bit in the front, which actually should be good from the neighbor's perspective to have the parking lot and everything going about 3 to 3.5 feet down. That's going to be very difficult to save that tree. Not impossible, but we can't just leave the tree in place, have 2 parking stalls taken out. We need to actually spread that out to the drip line of that tree. As we've seen that, we need to build that up. It's a pretty significant investment. And unfortunately, that means losing more parking spaces, and that's the fundamental problem. It's not saving the tree, it's the loss of parking. So hopefully that sheds a little bit more light on that issue. Otherwise, we're happy to answer any questions. Oh, sorry.
Yes, sir. Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you so much for allowing me to come back up. I really appreciate staff's comments struggling with this variance. I know that variances are a difficult thing in any community, but in particular Los Gatos is one of the beauties of that, having gone through this process once or twice in this town. I would say to you that parking in this particular case, we need help. Actually all the speakers said, including John, you said something that we were going to talk about tonight, that most of these Whole Food stores that were overparked under other ordinances have parking stalls that just aren't used. And none of us want asphalt. We want activity. We want the things that really mean something. And I think all of the things you all mentioned and others mentioned tonight are so strong. And I would like to encourage us as a dialogue to try to find reasons for this variance. So I'm here and so is Steve and the rest of our team, to help in any way we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So I'll turn to the commissioners and ask if they have any. I'm sorry? We're only allowed to speak one time, I'm sorry. 1 minute. That's the rules of the commission, the policies, not only to allow one speak. Okay, so I'll move on to asking the commissioners if they have comments or questions. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and just a couple of other questions that the public has brought to our attention that I wanted to ask about. One having to do with the location of the loading docks, loading bays. One of the correspondences we received suggested flipping it to the other side of the building so that it's where you're having more of your heavy traffic, ingress, egress off of Los Gatos Boulevard. I don't know that there's a left turn lane there or whether that would make sense. But if you could speak to the location, why the loading bays are there, understanding how close that is in proximity to the neighborhood, and its impact on Peach Blossom Lane.
Yes. So that's an item that we spent a tremendous amount of time thinking about and working through. In particular, we are now finishing what now will be a 4-way intersection there, which now it's not. That is a really good thing, according to the Transportation Department here and our own consultants. This loading area is completely tucked back in and then fully screened with a very high fence and gate areas that will be very different from anything in Los Gatos. The current Whole Foods right now has nothing in the back other than a few shrubs, and it opens directly out onto the same street. So we wanted to be more sensitive to that. We created these taller walls. We created the gating elements. The actual trash and everything for the project is tucked in behind there. To be able to, if we were to flip this to the Los Gatos Boulevard side, none of the truck turning radiuses would work that are required not only by the town, but just good common practice for the Whole Foods deliveries. And and with this improvement of the driveway and how it aligns to that existing street, I really believe is going to be a really good circulation pattern. Thank you.
If I may add, because when we were on Trace, we actually went through a number of iterations looking at this very thing. So it is a little bit of an unusual site, particularly the way it sort of doubles back on itself. But when we were looking at potentially putting the loading docks on the right-hand side, number one, as Ken is saying, sort of the turning movements of the trucks really have to go through the parking lot substantially. So as they're coming off of Los Gatos Boulevard, they will have to intrude in that parking lot. And really, unfortunately, what that would force is 100% nighttime deliveries, because once we have a conflict in the parking lot with carts, kids, strollers, everything else, the trucks cannot be in there at the same time the store is open. And that's something that we didn't want to commit to, just late night deliveries, because that's also incredibly noisy on the neighbors. We want as many daytime deliveries as we possibly can. When we looked at putting it on this left-hand side, I know there is one neighbor who's sort of adjacent, and actually, Director Paulson, if you go down one more slide, I think I put an aerial in there. Thank you. So it's a little bit far away even from my eyes. But as we put the loading docks where the existing driveway is, we tried to interface it with the shopping center that's existing, the Nob Hill Center that's out there right now. That's the parking. It's already a sort of heavy interface. There is an intersection. There was comments on accidents in the intersection. We are putting a lot of improvements on that to help solve that. But unfortunately, there is the beginnings of the single-family neighborhood that's close. It is catty corner, it's adjacent, but it's probably the least sensitive of the property lines that we could find to put those there and still hide those loading docks so they're not visible from an architectural design perspective. So,
Further question? Yes.
One further question. With regard to the large oak tree that's of interest to the neighbors, how many parking spaces would be lost if you retained that tree?
7.
Thank you.
Commissioner Burnett?
Thank you, Chair. So I think it's a beautiful project, actually. I like
Commissioner.
You can hear your microphone better? Nope, you turn it off now. Can you move it a little
used
closer?
to this. Is it working?
Can you move it a little closer?
Ah.
There you go.
I'm new here. So, yeah, I think it's a beautiful project. I like all the articulation of the buildings, the color, you know, it's a very, very nicely done, and I like that the 4 recommendations from our town architect were used, changing some colors on some parts of the building, and I think that was appropriate and great. I do have one question. The hours, you're saying it's from 7 a.m. to 10, and then there were, then the next sentence it said employees working and there are employees working outside of those hours. So could you speak to that, please?
Correct. So in terms of those are the public interfacing hours when the store is open and people are allowed to come in. So once the public hours are done, that's sort of when shelves begin to be restocked. And then they have a later night cleaning crew that's sort of in the midnight to 2 or 3 a.m. hours. And then somewhere around 4 to 5 a.m. is when the bakers come in. And that's when they start doing all of their cooking for the day. So the building is almost 24-hour operations. There's at least security, and there's some personnel in the building on a 24-hour basis. That's what Whole Foods is doing right now. Nob Hill is doing the same thing. So we can sort of tweak the hours of the delivery for that. But yeah, there's, for the most part, people in the building 24/7.
Any questions, Mr. Espy? I have a question for you. I'm making you come up and sit down. Concerning the shipping and receiving area, are we talking about a fence or a wall to screen that?
Yeah, I think there is.
In my presentation.
One of the images, other way, Joel.
No, keep going.
Oh, sorry.
It's good. Keep going.
Okay.
One more slide, right there it is. So this is Ken again. You can see the upper elevation. That is the Los Gatos Boulevard, excuse me, the Los Gatos Almaden street edge. And you would, you start at the corner where we've got that glass element, and we do have an outdoor patio space there with some public art. And then as you're moving along, you have the building and the glass and glazing, some art and a mural as an art project. And then you can just see the wall just to the right there. Thank you so much for putting the cursor there. And so it is a tall wall. It's going to screen all lower activities. The top part of the truck might be exposed on one of the larger trucks, but everything else that's done in that yard would be in that enclosed area.
I see. Thank you for that, but I have a follow-up question, whether there are any practical mitigation measures that could be taken concerning the sound nuisance to the neighbor?
Yes, I think Steve already mentioned controlling the hours, which would be in work hours. The gate itself will do that. It's not fully enclosed over the top, but it is completely surrounded by both building and the screen wall. Then we've layered up some trees and shrubbery in front of that, as well as some stone columns that end up getting infilled. So I really think we don't have an outdoor trash enclosure. It's inside that area. And then we have roll-up doors that any activity that would be loading would be sealed by the truck. That would be, people removing things out of those vehicles. So trucks aren't idling. Whole Foods is very sensitive to that. Their current location opens right out onto the same street without any of this screening. So I think it's going to be a significant improvement.
The neighbor also mentioned the possibility of quieter fans for the ventilation system. Can you address that?
I think yeah. Yes, and that's a legitimate concern. So I live across from a commercial building myself, and there are times when it's just the air is moving in the right direction that you can just hear the buzz and the noise and a sound. Director Paulson, I think we have a roof plan on here showing where we put the mechanical equipment. So we do have some variable locations that we can actually move the rooftop around, and we have a screen on it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I apologize. So that's basically a schematic layout of what the rooftop equipment can look like. So again, we tried to sort of push it away. It's not on the ground. We try to push it away as far as we can from that neighboring area. It is set back from Los Gatos Boulevard because of visual. So we don't want the mechanical to be seen at all. So that's our best attempt to address it. Now, obviously, when the store opens up, if there's noise issues, then we're going to need to go out there and address those issues. There's a lot of ways to put quieter fans, sound blankets, or especially the compressors, which is really the big key. When an air conditioner starts up or any kind of refrigerator, that initial noise that comes from that compressor until it gets up to speed is probably the worst in terms of a dBA and a dBB, which is the ground-borne vibrations, the impact. So we'll need to go out there and make sure that they don't hear anything. But this is significantly far from this neighboring residence, so I don't anticipate we're hearing a lot. I know that in his letter, the issues with the Los Gatos Cafe, which he is significantly closer to, that may have been old equipment, which is also part of the issue. The newer the equipment, the quieter it is. The older the equipment, the noisier it is. So,
can you also address his issue regarding the trash compactor noise?
Yeah, the compactors are internal to the building. There's not going to be noise from that.
Okay, that's
so
good to hear.
Those have to be, they're not an outdoor cardboard compactor or something like that. Everything is internal to the loading docks. So,
thank you again.
Yep.
Commissioner Jenna.
Yes, one question regarding the issue of street activation and the notion that you've got like solid walls along these two corner, I guess it's a corner. You mentioned that there's an outdoor patio at the forward edge of the property. Is that patio accessible from inside the building as well, or is it only neighborhood people passing by?
Yeah, it would be both. We have We have anyone coming from the public right-of-way on Los Gatos Boulevard, and then coming in through the front plaza area. You can enter the store from there. You can get your prepared food. You can take it out then to sit at the table and the umbrellas and everything, or take it away.
All right, so there is pedestrian access.
Absolutely. The corner of the building is
the main
activated
entrance.
per the boulevard guidelines. Yes,
Right, thank you.
Any further questions? Comments?
A question for staff, if that's okay.
Yeah, please, Mr. Espy.
Thank you. Staff, I was looking through the conditions of approval, and I didn't note, and maybe I just missed it because there was quite a few. Do we have a window for deliveries? It seems to be a concern. Oh, sorry. With respect to the conditions of approval, do we have set forth in there anywhere the hours of acceptable delivery times?
Thank you for the question. So currently, the conditions of approval for the conditional use permit does not contain a specific set of hours for delivery times.
All right. Could we, if we were so inclined, include language to that effect?
You could.
Thank you. One more.
Sir?
A question for the applicant then. Would you be amenable to, as part of your conditions of approval, agreeing to certain limited hours of delivery?
So we would prefer not. Deliveries do come on a 24-hour basis at times. So unfortunately, our modern grocery stores aren't working as they used to, which is they have a large semi-truck show up, once a day, that unload everything out of the truck. How they're working now is everything is coming from smaller locations, smaller distributors, is we're sort of moving, particularly with Whole Foods, moving towards more local vendors, more organic vendors. They have a large variety of delivery trucks that come into this store. And that's only going to increase over time. So we're seeing less of the large semi-trucks and just a lot more of the small little delivery vehicles. And some of those are going to be coming from locations afar where they may be showing up early morning hours, something like that. What I would suggest, though, is not necessarily the trucks and their delivery pulling into the loading docks is the issue. It might be other means like idling trucks, which the speaker had mentioned that, and that is a concern. So some of the trucks, we can have them not idle. I'm trying to think of other ways to address this, but we'd prefer that there will be late night deliveries, as there are at Nob Hill Foods in the shopping center across and Whole Foods today.
No, I appreciate that information. Thank you so much.
Okay.
If there are no further questions, do any of the commissioners want to offer comments or propose a motion?
Through the chair, if you want to close the public hearing so that you
Yeah, I
can
will.
begin your deliberations.
Thank you. So at this time, we will close the public hearing, and see if I have other notes here. Close the public hearing and ask for any further comments from the commissioners or a motion if potentially. Yes, Commissioner Jenoff.
Thank you. I think just for discussion purposes to talk about the parking space requirements, I think there's a compelling argument to allow the fewer number of parking spaces. I think the overall shopping habits have changed quite a bit over the last couple of years. I know Whole Foods does have a robust delivery system, and that eliminates parking. There was an article in the New York Times today that talked about the many number of municipalities doing away completely with parking or changing their parking requirements. So this is a big thing, not just in Los Gatos, but it's a big question nationally that municipalities are struggling to get the answer right. I don't find that the 7 fewer spaces is a compelling reason to have a problem with this application. So I would be in favor of making the variance. Furthermore, if I look at the site plan and the location of the proposed structure and the parking, it's not easy to see where 7 additional spaces would come from without carving out a section of the building, and even doing that might create some other problems. So I'm looking at the plan on L4, and I'm not seeing a reasonable way for us to get 7 spaces without doing something awkward to the overall plan layout. So I would be in favor of approving the variance for parking.
Thank you. Other comments? Commissioner Respy?
Thank you, Chair. I would join Commissioner Janoff. I've I find the argument regarding delivery services compelling. I'd like, at some point, some more information about what other jurisdictions are doing with respect to their parking allocations. But my suspicion is that we are a little more stringent than many, and for those reasons, on the parking variance, I'm in complete agreement. I think we should go ahead and grant that. And then going broader as to the project overall, I was excited when I was driving down the boulevard and I saw story poles. I've been living in town for several years and waiting for something to happen at that property. And so as soon as I saw the orange netting go up, I was excited to see it. And then as I received my packet, I was happy to see that the project as proposed wasn't seeking a great deal of variance. It currently meets required setbacks, lot coverage, and height requirements. The proposed lot coverage are both within our mandates. And so I think it's a well-designed and thoughtful project. So I thought the renderings were artful. I thought they were engaging. It's not to say it's perfect. I wish we could do something with those trees. If there would be a way to salvage those with the plans, I would be in favor of that. And I would be in favor of doing as much as we can to help the immediate neighbors. But overall, I like the proposed project as designed. I like the tenancy coming in, and I'm generally in favor of what's being presented to this evening.
Thank you. Further comments? No? Oh, you do. Commissioner Jennifer.
I know I'm so far away. I wanted to add that another compelling reason for reduction of the number of parking spaces has to do, in my view, with the location of this property in proximity to the high-density residential area just behind with regard to apartments and condominiums. I thought that argument was a very compelling one. We want more high-density in Los Gatos residential, and having a grocery store to serve that density makes sense. These people are going to be walking, they're going to drive their cars around the fence. So I thought that was another good reason that we could find for that variance.
Commissioner Burnett?
Thank you. Yes, and I just want to say that, again, I think this is a wonderful project, and I think it's wonderful in the sense that it is a new project on Los Gatos Boulevard, and it's like the other projects are going to be coming to Los Gatos Boulevard. This is going to be like a showcase, and it's going to sort of show to the other projects that would be coming about what we like and what we want for Los Gatos. So I think it's going to be a showcase, and I'm really excited about it, and I think you did a very good job, very sensitive in a lot of ways. So it's very appealing, I think, for the citizens of Los Gatos. I think we need something like this right now. Thank you.
I have a couple of comments. I think it's an extremely well-designed building, very attractive. As I understand, the applicant has made very, not difficult decisions, but has engaged with the staff very deeply in making it a project that would be conforming to the commercial design lines as well as the aesthetics of the community. I share the concern about the trees, but I also note that tremendous work has been done about mitigation with replacement trees. And we do need to make a finding for a variance, which was the sticking point for the town. And I think that under section 2910-170, we can make a variance based on the fact that there's a unique shape to the lot, particularly the rounded curb at the intersection of Los Gatos Boulevard and Los Gatos Almadrón Road, which limits parking availability. So with that, I would invite a motion. Commissioner Janoff.
I'd be pleased to make a motion, but I have a question for staff. I'm looking at 3 different motions. Exhibit 2, Exhibit 3, and Exhibit 4. Could you, well, one is a conditional use permit, but we've got 2 conditions of approval. So I would be happy to make the motion, but I want to make sure that I'm referring to the proper exhibit.
It's Exhibit 2 you'd be referring to.
Exhibit 2, and then with regard to the conditions of approval, is it 3 and 4, or 3 or 4?
It would be 3 and 4.
3 and 4, all right. Thank you. All right, so I I move to approve construction of a new commercial building of formula retail business, Whole Foods, greater than 6,000 square feet, a merger of 2 lots into one, a variance from the required number of parking spaces, and the removal of large protected trees on property zone CH. APNs 424-14028 and 036, categorically exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15332, infill development projects. Property owner applicant Steve Lynch, Sand Hill Property Company, project planner Jocelyn Schutman. And this is, the site is 15600 and 15650 Los Gatos Boulevard. Architecture and site application S22008, subdivision application M22002, conditional use application U22005, and variance application V22004. I can make the required findings for CEQA, the required compliance with the zoning regulations, required findings for demolition of existing structure, required findings to deny a subdivision is that right, to deny a subdivision application or to approve a subdivision application?
It's that none of those findings can be made to deny, therefore it is approved.
Approved. That, all right, thank you. And I can make the required findings for a conditional use permit. I can make the required findings for granting a variance application as noted by our chair with regard to the shape of the property. Also, I would add the location or surroundings with regard to high-density residential housing in the proximity makes a difference. And the granting of the variance does not constitute a grant of special privileges inconsistent with the limitation upon other properties in the vicinity and zone with such property is situated. I can find that it meets the commercial design guidelines and as required by section 29.20.150 of the town code, the considerations and review of an architecture and site application were made in reviewing this project. And this motion would also include exhibits 3 and 4 conditions of approval?
Correct.
Thank you for that complete motion, and I'll look for a second.
I'm not going to repeat it.
Commissioner Espy.
Chair, I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion? If not, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Raspy.
Yes.
Commissioner Burnett.
Yes.
Commissioner Jeniff.
Yes.
And I vote yes, so the matter passes unanimously. Thank you very much, all who participated.
And Chair, I will read the appeal rights.
Oh, please, I want somebody heard up.
The decision of the Commission can be appealed to Town Council by any interested person as defined by Town Code Section 2910.020 within 10 days on forms available online with fees paid. Final deadline is 4 p.m. on the 10th day.
Thank you for that. So we'll now move on to other business, the first being the report from the Director of Community Development.
Thank you. On behalf of the Director of Community Development, I want to share some recent work by the Town Council on matters of interest to the Planning Commission. Since the last time that you met in January, the Town Council has approved a housing element on January 30th that, as per your recommendation, on February 7th, they approved code amendments for lot mergers, also recommended by the Planning Commission. And last night, on March 7th, they approved the first reading of Plan Development Amendment for the Shannon Valley Ranch subdivision and discussed several topics on SB 9, but did not make any changes to that ordinance. In addition, I want to share that the Housing Element Advisory Board will be meeting next week on the 16th to take a look at the revised version of the housing element. That we expect to have the revised version online by the end of this week, with both a track changes version showing the changes that have been made in response to the state's comments, as well as a response memo that lays out how those comments have been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Armour? No? Then we'll move on to subcommittee reports. In addition to their service on the Planning Commission, members of the commission serve on several town committees, the Conceptual Development Advisory Commission, GPAC, which is now the Housing Element Advisory Board, and the Historic Preservation Committee. And there's no report from CDAC for this meeting. Are there reports from HEB or HPC?
No, there's no report from HPC.
Actually, I think because Planning Commission hasn't met for quite some time, I think we did have one interim meeting since our last Planning Commission meeting. And it was the matter that's before us earlier, 202 University, the moving of an ADU, which has been continued. So,
You're correct.
thank you. And if there are no other matters before the commission, I'll, as always, express my great thanks to the staff for their very large staff report this time, and to my fellow commissioners for their participation. And with that, I'll call the meeting adjourned.